Good morning. This is the New York City Board of Standards and Appeals Public Review Session for July 15, 2019. We'll begin with decision item number 1, 2016-4153BZ, 4701 19th Avenue, Brooklyn. This is the project witness application.
So as mentioned, that the hearing was closed. At the applicant's assistance, we closed the hearing but left the record open for the applicant to make the D finding that the hardship complained of was not created. In response, an excellent study, I thought, was provided that works carefully through the effects of treating the two 22 by 100 5-foot lots as a single development site, a 44 by 100 5-foot corner lot with no rear yard requirement and no allowance for a permitted obstruction by a community facility in the required rear yard, which becomes a side yard of an interior lot. If it had stayed separately, it would have been an interior lot with a required rear yard where you have a permitted obstruction, which would have been applicable to a synagogue. So it actually kind of would have increased the degree of waiver because you would have needed a waiver for a side yard as opposed to no waiver for the rear yard for the synagogue. The study shows that a complying building on the combined lot would not be sufficient to provide for the needs of both the synagogue and project witness. You could actually say either the synagogue or project witness, right? So waivers would be required to fulfill those needs, which waivers, due to the duplicative circulation spaces and layering of uses, would result in a building with far more floor area and height than is proposed for a single separate lot for project witness, or they didn't show us it's single separate for the synagogue, but it would have been the same issue. I think it would have been a smaller building. I want to add that I very much appreciate the care that was taken with the study to answer questions before they arose, and to consider multiple scenarios. So each time I'm thinking in my head, but what if? Then the if followed in the next page. So I'm persuaded that based on the study, the D finding has been met, which finding I want council to note in our resolution is not overcome by the common law Cornell doctrine, deference doctrine. Anybody else?
I agree with you. I really commend the team for providing a very thoughtful analysis, and it carefully went through all the pros and cons and highlighted the issues that you mentioned, that a new hardship would be created. I have no further comments, and I think all along I've been very supportive of this project, and so should we vote tomorrow, I would vote yes.
I also was very pleased with the submission, and I feel that they have met all 5 findings.
Okay. Anybody else?
No, I agree.
I was satisfied with the submission. I'm happy to see this coming to a close. I look forward to voting on it.
Great.
Appeals calendar, continued hearing items. Item number 2, 2017-310A, 1002 Farragut Road, Brooklyn. Do we call them separate, or you want to keep them separate?
I think they have to be called separately because we're looking at one issue
Okay,
first.
I just I'll make
Right.
sure. Okay.
Even though
So this
I
is
think when-
Department of Buildings application that I just
Right.
called.
Oops. Sorry. Lots of notes. Oh, so wait a second. This is the Department of Buildings application to
Yes.
revoke, right?
To modify.
So, to modify. So I think it's too early for us to be deciding on this, so it's
We
kind
need
of
to
like
three.
we postpone it or adjourn it until we've decided on the use group, right?
That's what I'm...
Right.
So then, item number 3, 2019-45A, 1002 Farragut Road. This is an appeal of the DOB interpretation that a motor freight station for regulated medical waste use at the premises constitute a use group 18.
Right. Okay, so in terms of the submission, I'm just reading my notes. There were drawings that were provided showing demising walls between the automotive repair use and the medical waste transfer facility, but, and then a discussion in the cover letter that says the demising wall is there, but the photos that we saw last didn't show a demising wall, so we need photos of the as-built condition to reflect the construction of the demising wall between those two. My basic comments generally are that I need more guidance from DEC. I need DEC to comment on the locations of the medical waste transfer stations and the difference, if any, between them and the 10 facilities that may be treatment facilities, medical waste treatment as opposed to transfer, that are listed on DEC's open data site. And the list of facilities in New York State that submitted annual reports this year, and the difference between the type of registration for the subject site versus, say, the location that's called Stericycle, the facility on Staten Island called Stericycle, which I note that many other either waste producers or waste managers or whatever they are, they send their waste to Stericycle, because I was looking at the registration materials and the annual reports, and often on the annual reports it would say they dealt with X number of tons of something, and then it was sent to Stericycle. So Stericycle seems to be clearly that one in Staten Island that I had mentioned at the last hearing, which is in an M3, is use group 18. It's the only one where I actually saw CO that refers to it. That seems very much to be something where they take the waste out and they do things to it, right? So, and the annual report for the Stericycle site looks very different from the subject site. So the Stericycle site is described on the annual report as a permitted waste, whatever, a permitted 360 location. 360 is the section in the New York State
Environmental control law?
Right. And that is referring in general to medical waste. But so Stericycle is a permitted facility, whereas this transfer site is a registered facility. And I don't understand why one's registered and one is permitted, and that's really DEC who could explain that to us. What's the difference in criteria that they look at? I actually looked at the website that actually, I think it was DOB gave us the link to, and there were all of these registrations for about 20 different sites. And I looked at all of them, and though I may not have understood what I was looking at because it's very technical, all of them but the subject site are permitted, and the subject site is registered. And so is it just because this site is now under the sort of watchful eye of lots of neighbors, so they registered and other ones don't? Or is it, what is it? I didn't really understand. Or is it really that registration normally sits in another file somewhere on DEC's website, and I just didn't know how to get there. So DOB submitted papers, and they seem to be holding firm to potential dangers of transferring the Ebola virus and radioactive waste on a major scale. I don't know why DOB isn't concerned about the laboratories that work with such active viruses, which are use group 17, for example, and permitted in M1 districts. Or, as mentioned, the hospitals that treat such patients in our districts. I continue to be very confused about the inconsistency of their viewpoints in this case, and really need the expertise of DEC to clear up those distinctions. And I know that our council has been reaching out to DEC to try to get someone to come to the hearing or in some way give us this information. I can also look up the definition. So the DOB also talked about what freight transfer station is, and they talked about that freight is something where you're transporting goods, and goods have value. Well, that depends on which dictionary definition you look up for freight. And I actually looked it up also, and the word also means burden like the burden, the beast of burden kind of thing, right? Which was a beast that carried stuff, right? Or a load, neither of which requires the transporting of goods, because as we know, beasts carry all kinds of nasty things. Some did when there were beasts of burden. I also learned that it's actually a German derivation that means burden. Nonetheless, I agree that if the board were to allow this use under use group 16, I do agree with DOB that it should be specific about its scope so as not to inadvertently permit medical waste treatment facilities under the same rubric. So at this point, I think of the transfer station as just taking boxes and taking boxes off a truck and putting them down, because I don't believe that they actually transfer truck to truck as was described at the hearing. Taking the boxes, putting them down, putting them on a scale, marking them, whatever it is, and then putting them on another truck. And that there's no opening of the boxes, whereas the waste transfer management stations clearly open the boxes, take the sharps out and do whatever. And then there was another thing that crematoria are permitted in a C8 district, and crematoria are handling body parts, and bodies.
I think that if we do decide that way, we have to define sorting, because sorting is a term that's used in the statute, and they do admit to a certain level of sorting, but we have to define that as a certain limitation on what is actually sorting and what is just packaging and labeling for which plant. Because weighing could be seen as sorting one weight group from another weight group.
Yeah. Oh, right, that's true. So wait a minute, in which statute? In the 360 statute?
What defines in use group 18, it says the sorting, it says the handling and sorting of the treating and sorting of waste, of this type of waste. Obviously, there is a level of sorting here, but we would have to find that level doesn't reach what is meant by the statute.
It's removing it from the containers, the sealed containers provided by the medical waste producer, the generator.
Or even defining what is in, I'm not sure if this particular facility knows what's in each, is in each
hope
casket.
not.
So,
Right?
and that's what I understand sorting to be, to
Yeah.
separate certain types of waste from other types of waste.
Right.
Not just weighing of
Yeah.
waste.
No, I agree with that. Other comment?
First, I'll go backwards. I agree with you, Chair, with regards to DOB's recommendations, like should we approve it, allow it under use group 16, be specific. And I think Commissioner Shibata brings up a good point regarding the sorting part of it. We can be clear about that. I think the fact that here there is a DEC permit that is being used.
A registration?
Registration.
Yeah.
So that should also be one of the factors as pointed by DOB. With regards to the explanation that has been provided by what is it called? CMW?
Yeah.
CMW.
Yes.
In terms of their operation, it seems like it is transferring good. And what I find fascinating that there are industries out there that are doing this job, which DOB considers to be not of economic value. And I think economic value is if you look truly by the economic value, by the economics term, the macro term, there is a value because there's a service. It's a goods and service. Economic value is based on goods and services. Here it's a service that is being provided, and there is a value added to that. And therefore, from that definition, it falls into the use group 16 and not 18 category. And again, I agree with you, Chair, with regards to the analogy that has been given and the uses, and given that, again, factoring in, when these uses were written, we did not know, the medical waste would be something that we need to be concerned of in the manner that.
Yeah.
So this is a new use. This is an opportunity for us to define it in a way that can help DOB in future separate a waste transfer station versus a waste management station. And so far, I wasn't quite convinced with DOB's arguments as to why it should be 18.
I have some more questions about the operations and also a couple of questions about the way in which the other properties have been classified. So when you look at the operational statement by the appellant, it says that CMW is actually experienced and has done this at other locations in and out of New York City. So I wanted to know if they knew of the classifications and the zoning districts of the other sites. Then, when they talk about their process for scanning and determining whether or not there's radioactivity, they don't tell us how often they find those packages to be radioactive and what do they do with them once that's discovered. In terms of the storage on-site and relocation to other trucks, how long are the goods stored? And then to the statement that CMW must reject all packages that are not on the manifest, derived, damaged, opened, tampered with, or with leakage, what percentage is actually rejected? So that's all for me trying to determine how safely this use is operated at this site. As for that New York City, the New York State DEC website that indicates fewer than 10 regulated medical waste transfer facilities throughout the city, what are the use group classifications of the other 10 facilities? And then as to the DOB statement about freight denoting items of value, well, one man's treasure, is another man's trash, so to speak. And I think that people wouldn't be in the business of sorting and disposing and managing waste if it wasn't of value to somebody. So therefore, I'm not convinced at all by that point of argument.
I agree with the Commissioner at the Brown regarding finding more about the operation. In addition to that, my understanding is that they're gonna get the operator testify before us tomorrow. And I believe we need to ask about in their statement, they described something called consolidation. I was confused whether consolidation means opening and repackaging the waste, or it's just getting the package as it was packaged by the generator and just put them in the truck. So we need clarification on that, in addition to the other points raised.
Right, so, and that brings up the same issue that Commissioner Shabeta brought up with the precision of the language that we use, right? When we finally come to a decision about how to categorize a use group 16 is careful, because consolidation could sound like you take it out of the box and you put it in another box, and so many others could do the same. So we have to be very careful that the description is where none of the waste is removed from the packaging in which it was received, right? So something to the effect of that.
Paper doesn't talk, but if we can have a person present tomorrow to testify, we can have an exchange with them and get more clarification on what consolidation mean, what kind of sorting is done, and I want to add that I'm not convinced with the argument from the DOB side regarding the danger of spreading something like Ebola or something like that. I feel like this is exaggeration.
And I just wanted to ask, again, it's the applicant. We had testimony last time that was a little confusing about the relationship between whoever that was who was testifying and the actual operator of this facility, right? And so, because when we asked about it, they had originally told us that was a tenant, and that the tenant didn't come to the hearing, and then they would try to get the tenant to come to the hearing. And then we're kind of hearing that there is no more tenant, that the owner is the operator, something like that, and has a lot of experience. So I'm quite confused. But the person who comes to speak should not be the landlord. It should be the actual operator, manager of the site.
With first-hand knowledge.
Yeah, with first-hand knowledge, because we saw, for example, we were told that the weighing goes on in the truck, And then we see a scale on the ground, so that's inconsistent with that. And then I wasn't persuaded that that was just an extra scale sitting on the ground. Yeah, so,
I believe they are preparing for either, the way they wrote it, they said operator slash lessee. So if they are preparing on bringing somebody who doesn't have knowledge with the operation, I hope between now and tomorrow, they can like schedule somebody who has knowledge and let's make the hearing tomorrow be fruitful and move
Yes.
forward instead of wasting time.
right. Okay.
The only thing I want to add is that I understand that there was an inspection on the site. I know that we sent out a FOIL letter to get the
DEC
results. I'd like to see the results of that inspection. And I understand there's some difficulty retrieving it, but
Significant difficulty. We foiled it, and then they rejected, or they refused to divulge that information, citing an exception in FOIL to ongoing investigation. So
Which-
there may be some enforcement going on, but I spoke to council at DEC. It's apparently a routine thing. Their environmental control officers have the ability to not only issue citations for environmental conservation law violations, but also parking tickets. It's like, they're like cops, but environmental cops. Anyway, long story short, we're continuing to seek it. We're having problems getting it.
it sets a great deal of pause in me not knowing what they're investigating. If from what I understand, they said there's an open investigation that's continuing, and that's why they can't provide the information.
Right.
That's of concern.
But who's to say whether or not that actually impacts what use group they are for zoning, as
Yes.
opposed to something completely independent of
Right.
zoning, which is
Right,
what we're looking at.
but who is to say? It would be a lot easier to know upon the
Yes.
conclusion of that.
Certainly.
Right,
The
and,
other-
and part of it is that we're after a similar amount of information. It's not like
It's the same-
we're opposing.
we have the same goals.
We have the same goals, so, I mean, maybe through this process, council to council can persuade them to give us the information we need. And for me, it's not only the specifics of this facility, is to understand globally these kinds of facilities versus the other kind of facilities and how DEC knows the difference, right?
And
How-
kind of apply that in,
Yes.
should we go forward in agreeing to, uphold the permit, how do you define it?
Right.
Sure.
And I think the direction from DEC then becomes very critical.
Sure, but I think it's also important to, like, our purview is zoning, theirs is
Right.
environmental
Understood.
conservation. And I think that it's a, while we're seeking the information from DEC and kind of getting stymied, I think it's fruitful to also look at other uses in the city and how they're qualified.
Yes.
And take both tracks at the same
Yes,
time.
which is what, yeah.
Agree.
The only other thing I'd like to add is that I understand the DOB's argument that, I understand what kind of argument they're making by saying that fright needs to be goods, but an argument like that needs to be supported by some case law or something. That's what the ask to say, to just take a Webster dictionary definition and say that is enough to eliminate someone's use, that's a very big step for me.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Good? Special order calendar, item number 4, 41850BZ, 7369 217th Street, 7336 Springfield Boulevard, 21902 74th Avenue. This is a compliance hearing.
We received on July 9th a letter from council to the WOTC Tenants Corp., who are the owners of the subject property, that landscaping contracts had failed, and they are still looking for competent landscapers. The owners asked to adjourn the hearing until late fall of this year. That would be a year since our last hearing, and more than a year since we just had a conversation about hiring landscape architects. My notes show that at the November hearing, we saw, my notes show that at the November hearing, we saw estimates for fencing and landscaping. So there has been no progress since June of last year, when owners told us they were waiting for proposals from landscapers. I don't understand how it's so hard to find landscapers. There are big industry, right? I frankly don't understand why the proposal for landscaping the buffer zone is dated July 1st of this year, or the fence down payment is dated May 29th of this year, when the proposal for general maintenance of the rest of the grounds is dated March 1st of this year, and we discussed this in November. I think the only way to move this along is to demand a signed proposal and proof of down payment be provided to us by end of summer, so that the landscapers are poised to start planting in October. Otherwise, they'll just continue to kick this down the road. But meanwhile, there were photographs that were taken that showed the site clean. Yeah,
Yes.
so, which is progress, I think, maybe. Anybody else?
I think I understand our frustration. I also think this organization, this co-op has gone through a lot of change.
Yes.
They have a new board. The new board is trying to understand or unravel the mystery, and being a past co-op board member, it is not an easy task to get it done. So they have really undertaken a huge undertaking, and the fact that it's taking them so long, and we don't know what their financial situations are, and that's not what's before us. So there are a lot that's on their plate that we don't know and doesn't concern us, but I'm sure those are the things that they're struggling with that is causing them. But I'm glad to see that they are being respectful of the neighbors' issues and what we have directed them to do, which is to maintain that property and keep it in good condition. So I think they are in the right direction. So I would request that we give them be a little bit more lenient, given that it's a new board. But that's
But
just.
the thing is, planting season is October, and if you don't have a contract signed and a deposit down by the end of the summer, you lose your place in line, right? And you have to wait until April.
I agree.
So that's why.
And I also don't think there's any harm keeping a short leash here, especially with the neighbors' concerns and their recent letters that state that there seems to be spouts of activity and then months of inactivity. So it would be good to stay on it so we can ensure that that activity stays at a certain level.
Right. And frankly, if there's a financial issues, they could make a contract that says October, the following trees get planted, and payment for that work is due at the end of planting. And then in April, the next set of things get planted, but it's all in a signed contract, and they know exactly how to budget for it that way. Because if it's a lot of trees, I just don't really know what the costs are.
And I believe they're working with Councilmember Grodenchik's office to secure trees to be planted, because these are much more specialized trees, so that's also underway.
Yeah, it's great. I just mean from one of those neighborhood garden type programs. Yeah, because they're not city street trees. They might be through like green thumb gardens or something. Yeah.
I actually thought that they were moving along a little slower than we wanted them to, but they still are moving and making progress. When we see what we started with, which was a buffer area that was terribly neglected for decades, to a buffer area that's now fairly clean, and it is green. It is not formally landscaped, but it is green in a lot of spaces. And they're showing us that they're trying to get the contract together. Being in a co-op, it's not as easy as having a single landlord, professional developer who knows and is savvy about how to develop a property. These are people who are learning by the seat of their pants and trying their hardest to put together, a plan and have a contract in place that isn't going to break the co-op, but is going to honor the goals and the objectives that we've set for them. So I understand that we should have some kind of a status, question and answer session, but I wouldn't really want to thump them on the head, because I really think they're moving in the right direction.
Okay. Anybody else?
Item number 5, 31673BZ, 3102 68th Street, Queens. Received the fire department sign-off letter?
Let's see. Sorry, let me get.
Yeah. dated July 10th. Fire department had no issues.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm sorry, it just took me a second to make sure that I'm even on the right. This is
Yes.
68th Street,
Yep.
Queens.
Take your
Okay.
time.
The plans were revised to indicate elements missing at the last submission. I thought we discussed moving the vending machines away from the residential property line. They're still there. I know this is a super tight site, and I don't actually have any idea where you would move them to except where the dumpster goes. And then where do you put the dumpster except in that part of the property that doesn't belong to them? So I actually don't know what to say, except that maybe there's a way to buffer, put some kind of sound buffer behind the vending machines, something. I just imagine, I don't know how many people use these vending machines, but they're right in front of the windows of this apartment building. So I can just imagine soda cans banging in the middle of the night outside your window. And I didn't find a response about the noise attenuation for the HVAC equipment on the roof, but I did see notes that said, it's noisy there anyway, what's the difference? Except that there's a noise code and your HVAC cannot produce more than whatever that amount of noise is, so it has to comply, and if it doesn't, you have to put up an attenuation.
How about a condition?
Yeah, it could be a condition. And this is a general question. I think we concluded that there was no other solution to buffer the use from the adjacent apartment building because there's just room really for a fence, even though it would be much better if there were planting, but I don't see how a car gets out of there or in there or anything. So the reason that came up was because the last resolution actually said there should be a planting in response to community board concerns. That was the last resolution. But the drawings never showed planting. Probably reasonably so, because where in the world would you put it?
At the last hearing, Mr. Rothberg said that there were planters on the islands.
Yeah, no, but this is between the residential. There are these 3 little planters on the island. But this is really about, they're like 20 feet, I think they measured from the vents to the
Yeah.
windows.
Yeah.
So it's probably about that distance to the windows.
I think their better argument was that on the residential side, how they were maintaining it on the other side of that fence was much more obnoxious than the use
Right.
that is before us.
The way that the residential building is using their side yard is worse than this use, is what they
And that
said.
was,
Yeah.
from what they presented, it seemed that was,
Oh, but sometimes that's because it's such a bad place to be that you just treat it badly. Okay, so, but, yeah, we could do these things by condition, aside from the planting, which I just don't see.
Yeah, I don't
wish-
think planting is feasible, honestly, given such a narrow scale of this site. And then you have these vents that are required, and I think that will also kind of.
could decorative fencing work?
Well, there already is.
The fence is in good condition.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the fence is already there with slatting. It was just an opportunity to, the thing that's great about vegetation when it's well planted is it's a sound buffer. It improves the air quality, like all that kind of stuff. Right, and this goes back to, I remember a long time ago, I had this thing about why not vines on fences and like to learn how in the world do you create enough soil for a vine to be able to grow? Like, do they need 4 inches of soil and then that's good enough? I don't know, but at one point we reached out to Department of Parks, but we didn't get enough. They kept telling us you need 5 feet. So that wasn't helpful. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, you.
No, go ahead.
I think with regards to the vending machine, it's, in terms of the placement, of possible placement, it has to be somewhat located that's within the visible range of the attendees. So locating it where the dumpster is not possible because that's a solid wall there. So the next best is, and keeping it away from that aisle where the vehicles are going to be. I personally, being there on that site, BQE right being there, and it's an extremely noisy highway, even on its quietest moment.
I can't
I-
imagine a quiet moment.
If it has a quiet
I
moment.
can't
But then,
imagine
you
ever
know,
except
midnight,
okay.
midnight is quiet.
So as between the vending machine and the BQE.
Yeah, as between that, I still think the BQ will win the noise test, so I think we can be, my personal opinion, we can kind of let it be.
Okay.
Uh,
But we could also have them put up an acoustical shield or something around it.
Maybe in the back.
Yeah, in the back, that's
In
what
the
I
back,
mean.
yeah.
So that when the soda can hits the bottom, you're not thrown out of bed.
I had a question about the lighting plan. It looks as if the lighting is pretty high and then falls off
Yeah, to
quite
zero.
dramatically to zero from like 22 and 14.6. Is that realistic?
I don't know. If there's shields on the back, yes. So that, you know, that means it's completely black behind the light. That is possible, but, well, I don't know.
Maybe we confirm whether there are shields on the
Yeah.
lights.
Okay.
Item number 6, I apologize. 54084 BZ, 341 Soundview Avenue, the Bronx.
Okay, the submission we received was very basic, and I didn't think it responded to all of our prior comments made at the January and April hearings, which I can go over at tomorrow's hearing with the applicant. Work was supposed to have been done. All the required work was supposed to have been done, and photos demonstrating completion provided. We received only some landscaping photos, not key to plans, and no revised plans. The fence and block wall, which we mentioned, which show up very clearly in these planting photographs, are still in the same terrible condition they were before. And we had talked a lot about the sensor and the gate and the speed bump and so on at the last one, and said that the sensor had to be relocated because it wouldn't be triggered until you were already on the sidewalk. So I didn't see any mention of that. I'm a little bit confused about why the response was so minimal. Anybody else?
Go ahead.
Item number 7, 3191 BZ, 173 Kingsland Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay. The owner submitted a letter on this requesting withdrawal and stating that counsel, who has been representing this case before us, was actually tenant's counsel, and that the tenant has moved, and so this counsel doesn't represent the owner. The owner states that they will discontinue the commercial use at 173 Kingsland, and they state that 635 Meeker, which is the building that's located perpendicular to it, has a separate CO from 173 Kingsland, and they state that that separate CO allows commercial as of right. But we were provided in the application materials with a 1996 certificate of occupancy that shows both addresses on the single on the same CO for tax lot 34. And likewise, when I go to Biz, I see that same CO recorded against tax lot 35 with both addresses. So both addresses under Biz are listed connected to that site. So it's not true that it has its separate CO. So the 1992 resolution, the BSA resolution, indicates that the variance in 1992 was to allow the enlargement onto vacant lot 34, which is the subject site, of an existing non-conforming eating and drinking establishment that's located on lot 35. So the resolution confirms that the building was an existing non-conforming use, so that part of the statement by the owner is correct. So if we're to allow for the withdrawal, we have a CO issue. So before we allow for this withdrawal, we have to talk about the sort of the process for what we direct DOB to do. Do we direct DOB to modify the CO to remove lot 34? To separate them, to actually separate them. Because, so actually, go ahead.
No,
Carl.
again, it's just based on a conversation, but my understanding is that it's akin to a relinquishment of the variance.
Sure.
To allow the variance portion or lot to be used as an as-of-right, with the understanding that any nonconformity on the original site is subject to.
So having a relinquishment is one thing, but there is a C of O, which is binding until overturned, right?
Mm-hmm.
That says you can have a nonconforming use on the subject lot, right? And the CO hasn't expired because doesn't expire, because it's tied to the existing nonconforming use. The two are traveling together.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's truly a relinquishment of the approval, then you must separate the two tax lots, which remain separate tax lots, right? You must change the C of O, order a change. Otherwise, they'll continue to ride together, and you can open a restaurant the day after we vote on this.
So it would be like the variance would be relinquished, but ultimately not relinquished.
Yes.
The CO would reflect that that use is permitted.
Correct.
Right, they have to go and,
Amend their C of O.
No, but either we order it amended, or they have, so how can we enforce
Would that be a
it?
condition for withdrawal that they file to
Yes.
remember this year within 6 months or something?
And then what if they don't?
And what happens if they don't?
How can we
Yeah.
check that? Why don't we, that's why I'm saying, why can't we issue an order to DOB that requires that they modify the CO to reflect only commercial use, that's that existing non-conforming commercial use on lot 35, and then lot 34 is no longer on that CO, and it has to return to a conforming use, which is residential or community facility.
and the resolution could act like when this is done, not subject to an active application, but we get like a letter of no objection or something akin to that?
Oh,
I'm saying, well, I think with the,
no, why is there a letter of no objection then? Then after, we could have that order and then allow for the withdrawal. You know, the withdrawal and the order are either two resolutions are the same, I don't know how that works, how we
I think
decide.
it'd have to be the same.
Right, so, and then that's fine, so there would be no reason for them to come back to us at all. The DOB has its instructions, change the C of O.
Question, does the prior C of O reflect the board's approval? Like, does it have a calendar number?
Yes, it does.
It does. So there's a reason to modify it.
Yes, it has a calendar number, it states the conditions.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
On both locations traveling together.
Okay.
So there is no separate CO. It's true, you can look them up under separate lots, but
they
you
both
find
lead
the
to
same CO.
Okay.
no, I was just going to say, I agree, because the resolution could handle. Yes, that's it.
Okay.
Okay.
Item number 8, 13204BZ, 310 East Houston Street, Manhattan.
Okay. The never-ending saga, it seems, of this incredibly confusing application and needlessly confusing application, if you ask me. So the new submission clarifies in writing, because we discussed this a lot at the hearings, that the site was overbuilt with respect to its BSA approval, and that the applicant is asking for an amendment to the variance to allow for the legalization of an excess of 2,327 zoning square feet, so that's 4.6 FAR instead of 4.3 FAR, but more relevant to the scope of our approval, because our approval was only to allow commercial use on the site, is the requested increase in the commercial floor area of 140 square feet. So now that's in the paperwork as opposed to discussed at the hearings. at long last also is a discussion, sort of, about whether the terrace area should be counted as floor area, which discussion I've been asking for since we started to review this application in August. No calculation of the perimeter enclosure was provided, however, which is really what it's all about. It has to do with whether a terrace or a balcony is floor area, because more than 67% of it is enclosed with perimeter walls that exceed, I think it's 3 foot 6 inches high. So, so the question stands again, is more than 67% of the terrace enclosed, which is the 1210 definition of floor area. And the applicant's sort of wording around it implies that the only part of the enclosure that counts is the railing, and as long as the railing on the front of the balcony is lower than 42 inches, you're good. But this is enclosed at the rear and at the sides. And proof that that matters is that in the definition of floor area, it says if you have a balcony that runs essentially from property line to property line and it abuts a building on either side, you don't have to count that building on either side as the enclosure, because that's not your fault, it's not your building, right? But here, the enclosure is created by the developer, it's fully enclosed at the back, and at least enclosed on one side. I don't know if it's enclosed on the other side. I couldn't really tell that from the photographs that are provided. So we need an answer to that, and what makes me concerned is, triply concerned, is that at the last adjournment, and we talked about this at the last hearing, that maybe you needed a ZRD1 to find out whether this is floor area, right? The last adjournment request was accompanied by a letter stating that additional time was needed to obtain a ZRD1 that had to do with understanding how you calculate floor area. And I don't know why you would need a ZRD1, because calculation of floor area is very well known, right? No mechanical spaces, no cellar, no bulkheads. So what else do you need to talk about except this? And so, but meanwhile, we never got a ZRD1. And so I would actually like to see what the ZRD1 said. I read the revised statement of facts. So this is the next subject, and continue to ask why the applicant continues to discuss floor area as a pertinent to lot 40 versus lot 7503. This is one zoning lot, and unless the proposal is to subdivide the zoning lot, which frankly makes no sense, having been a lawyer specializing in transferable development rights, I don't understand why there's this discussion. If you're going to be selling floor area to the lot behind, you sell it from a zoning lot and you merge with lot 21, which seems to be the target site. And if you're planning on selling the floor area that's, quote, pertinent to 7503 on which the building is located, it needs to merge with lot 40. It needs to be part of lot 40 in order to transfer to lot 21, because lot 40 is what's sitting in front of lot 21. So what are they talking about? And I get the impression that this council doesn't have experience with zoning lot mergers, and that's why we keep having this conversation. So I have to ask again, what's the request here, other than to legalize the additional 140 square feet and to see whether there's a Bella Vista violation? I just don't understand what they're talking about. There's language actually now in the statement of facts that says the proposal is to remove lot 40, quote, from the variance, unquote. I don't understand. And again, variances are granted to zoning lots. So what are we talking about? And to this point, I also want to add that this application has been all over the place with its calculations of existing and excess floor area, which causes me great concern. In an earlier version of the application, it's like 3 hearings ago or something, we were told that there were 17,853 square feet of total excess development rights, And in this most recent version, we're told there are only 11,234 square feet of development rights available for transfer, but the building is only overbuilt by 2,300 square feet and change. So that's a very huge gap. Is that really bad math where they use, I can't figure out why there's such an enormous difference. And, you know, again, as somebody who used to work on lots of TDR transfers, you better be right, because if you enter into a contract and you're saying you have this much and you don't have it, serious problem in future, right? And so they're relying on, I think, an engineer who did a site visit. That's not what you do when you're checking air right transfers. You hire a surveyor who actually walks around and measures very, very carefully, because the developer is relying on, the developer of the new site is relying on that surveyor's representation of what's excess development rights. So I'm very confused, concerned, because they don't seem to know what they're doing about almost anything. And then I handed to Commissioner Otley Brown about whether the 140 square feet of additional commercial floor area, or the fact that the rest of the building was built about 2,000 square feet larger than what the board initially considered, implicates the findings. But we said earlier, I think, that we didn't believe that a Bella Vista issue arose with the transfer of the excess development rights that became available as a result of a zoning map amendment that occurred subsequent to the grant and couldn't have been anticipated. So, Commissioner Otley Brown.
So I still don't think that the new financials that incorporates all the new measurements is disturbing the Bella Vista finding. It seems like the finding is still, the results are still that without the sale of the development rights, the return on equity is 5.57%, but after the sale of those development rights, it's 5.82%. The question, and that's a minimal difference. The question is really the development rights, because the financials are talking about selling Lot 40's development rights that actually were available at the time of the variance, which is out of the 2,900 square feet, only 1,627 square feet were available at the time of the variance. But it totally neglects to talk about any of the development rights that were available at the time of the variance for Lot 7503. And this is important to note, because if you go back to their statement, they have a nice little one sentence mixed in everything that says, we also would like you to approve the sale of development rights to Lot 7503, which means then we have to do a similar analysis. What of those development rights were available at the time of the variance, and the development rights that were available at the time, did they disturb the minimal variance finding at the time of the variance to implicate Bella Vista? And they didn't do that. So that's what's missing from the paperwork and the financials from my perspective. Since they want to add in 7503, they have to talk about, were there any development rights attributable to 7503 available at the time of the variance? And if so, then they have to repeat the analysis that they repeated for the available development rights of Lot 40. Which is to value them, to talk about whether if they were sold at the time of the variance, would that satisfy E, or would it be an overreach of E?
Okay.
And then they could move on. It's entirely possible that nothing was available at that time,
so.
because they did overbuild, but they also have to state that then.
Right.
And they don't.
Right. And they were able to overbuild because, I don't remember whether the work started subsequent to the zoning change. I just don't remember the sequence of things, because the zoning change was pretty soon after,
Right.
like within a year or something. So their overbuilding might have just been allowed because it didn't implicate it wasn't a non-conforming or non-complying build,
Right.
except for the 140 square feet of commercial, which probably didn't show up until they did whatever kind of floor area analysis they did do. And the other part that was quite strange is in the statement of facts, the revised one, and the cover letter, they explain that, kind of, and I don't know for what, don't forget that this many hundreds of square feet is for staircases, and this many hundreds of square feet is for storage. What's that got to do with zoning floor area? I don't understand why they brought that up.
It could have been an answer to a question I had about the residential, the net residential versus the residential floor area, because when I went to the financials, it looked like there was such a drastic decrease in the amount of net residential floor area that I thought they got the measurements wrong. So I went to the project manager and said, could you just verify this? So it could have been answering that question.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Move on.
Uh-huh.
Item number 9, 6213BZ, 2703 East Tremont Avenue, the Bronx.
Okay. Photos were provided showing planting bumpers and pickets. Let's just say the person who installed the planting isn't a professional landscaper, but short of holding the hand of the installers, I think this is the best we're going to get out of this. So I'm tired. I wish people appreciated landscaping more than they do, you know. It's pretty, we like plants. Why don't people want to install, when they spend all this money, why don't they want to do it in a way that is going to last and look good? And I know this would be painful for L'Oreal to see.
Picket fence were cute.
Yeah, but these little picket things, those are going to last about 4 hours, yeah.
Yep.
So I think we should,
I
in
think
a
those little
resolution, we should
sticks.
say about maintaining and,
Yeah, no, we are going to have that, but because I directed you pickets, which aren't those little things you put in temporarily
the middle
until
ones,
you're,
right?
yeah, but they're usually made out of cast iron or something like that, and they're not those little U ones you use so that the tomatoes grow, and then when the tomatoes are done, you pull them out. These are permanent installations, and what they ended up buying was something like that, almost for your tomato plant. So.
I have questions about the signage, the analysis that was provided is fine, the signage analysis.
Okay.
They have answered my question. Okay.
New cases, item number 10, 90-90BZ, 90-91BZ, sorry. 636 City Island, the Bronx.
Okay, we have proof of service of initial application and of notice of hearing to officials. Community Board recommends approval. The proposed floor plans need to be dimensioned so that we can verify that the building and zoning lot has not changed since the 1991 approval. And what if parcel A, which is what they describe it as, which is no longer shown on the proposed site plan, but was included on the same zoning lot in the original, it just sort of went away. Asphalt and fencing is in need of repair or replacement. Landscaping and the street tree has to be planted before we decide on this. We need clarity on the plans about adjacent uses and the their relationship to planting, lumen spread, and trash storage. So you can't really look at these in isolation if you don't know how far away the adjacent uses are and what they are. And I'm not understanding at all how the parking layout can pack in 35 cars plus 4 reservoir spaces where the orientations shift. I was trying to imagine, even if we were doing this with bumper cars, how you get to turn the car around to face the perpendicular way within that little bit of a reservoir area. I just didn't understand it. Maybe those expert valets can twirl them on they like hit the brake and the accelerator at the same time, and then it twirls the car. But anyway.
I had a question about the total square footage difference between the original and the existing plans, because when you add up each store in the original versus each store in the existing, today, there's a difference of about 400 square feet, so they need to rectify that or explain it. And then I went to the site because I looked at the pictures of the parking lot and it looked like it was a dump. And I went to the site and the parking lot is a dump.
Oh,
Yeah, it's cars parked every which way. There are trucks parked back there. There's no striping, no landscaping. It's a free-for-all. And it's pretty much an eyesore for the residential behind the site, as well as the two apartments, the 2B2 apartments above on the site.
I had a couple of questions. So as part of the proposal, there will be a reduction in the eating and drinking establishment floor area from the approved, so which would also reduce the parking requirement for section 112-113. That needs to be clarified in the statement of facts. Also, wouldn't parking be required for the additional residential use on the subject lot for 25-22B? So I think that may become a wash because if the eating and drinking establishment floor area reduces and the additional parking space of but that needs to be clearly stated and need to be factored into the zoning analysis chart. And the lumen spread should be 0 on the adjoining lot 65 and 66. That's the I'm sorry. That's where the residential use is. There were conditional mitigations regarding signals and street lighting. My question is if those were met.
those are always so hard.
Those are, exactly, those are, because typically DOT will test it and then determine. And we just need to know if that determination was made by DOT or not.
Right. In other words, did they pursue them? It was a condition. DOT could say, nah, we're not going to do it, and then that's that. Right.
Sorry.
Okay. Anybody else? No?
Item number 11, 18896BZ, 444 Soundview Avenue, the Bronx.
We have proof of service of initial application and of notice of hearing to officials. Community Board recommends approval. The existing convenience store is proposed to be enlarged, but creates this strange inaccessible area between the property line and the back of the building. It's this really strange little triangular thing where you can't physically get your body into a part. I'd like to know what that is and how will it be treated and accessed for repairs, trash, cleanup. It just looks like an area to encourage storage or debris or vermin or all those really attractive urban phenomena. The 141 square foot extension is proposed to be built separate from the trash enclosure, although they are adjacent to each other and to the Underhill Avenue property line. They should be built as a single structure with a continuous wall so as not to be an eyesore. And the finished materials should be stated on the drawing and be the same all the way across. The walkway around the building has been eliminated in the drawing. It should be put back. Is there a proposal to be a car wash as was shown on the approved drawings and in photo view number 1? The price sign and ID are shown hanging over the property line. How is that permitted? I didn't think that's allowed even by 18 inches. They have something that's called price and ID sign, that's how they label it, and it hangs over the property line significantly. I don't understand how that's permitted. And I see that it was shown in the prior approved set, but I don't understand how that's permitted.
And it's not even overhanging, it seems it has 2 legs.
Yeah, it seems like it's built on somebody else's property. Yeah, so I just, it's on city property. The photos show the site very messy with clothes bins, miscellaneous signs, and fences. The building is in need of painting and repair. Rolling gates should be removed and those openings closed and properly finished. So no longer, because they're not any longer in use according to the change in the plans. The drawings, Well, you can't really tell. I don't know if it's within the property because the property line, the drawings show it outside of the property line. So, and this, therefore, the city has a very wide sidewalk, right? Maybe it's a street widening, I mean, I don't know. Drawings imply that this will be an effective demolition of the existing building. So it shouldn't read like a patchwork. And incidentally, because I'm picking up on Carlo's expression when I said that, I don't believe demolition is permitted for a pre-61 variance. So the drawings need to clarify carefully what is to be removed and what is retained. And if there's any questions on that, Carlo will add.
Are the drawings dimensioned? Because I have a note that it's difficult to see whether the enlargement meets the TPPN about it being a maximum of 2,500 square feet.
Okay.
The sales area.
The sales area,
It's the
though.
Sales area specifically,
The building could be larger.
Yes,
but-
right.
I think there's only 780 square feet of actual sales area.
Okay. So you did see that, okay. Just
But drawings do need to dimension anyway, in part because we need to understand whether this is a demo of an existing building.
Yes.
Received fire department letter.
Oh,
They have no objection, and they will continue to inspect these premises and enforce all applicable rules and regulations. They said that the installation of new pumps shall be filed with fire department for review, approvals, and permits. The Bureau's Tech Management and Hazardous Material Unit has been informed of the application and will monitor compliance with applicable rules and regulations.
okay.
I just had one question. Weren't they supposed to get rid of the car washing machine when this was before us before? I know we had a big conversation about it. I thought it was supposed to go.
Oh, okay. Because it's shown on the approved drawings.
Yeah, I guess
The last
maybe
set.
we allowed them to keep it, but if they could just refresh my memory, it's just been driving me a little crazy.
Well, that kind of brings up, in a non sequitur, the fact of sometimes the drawings don't match what was intended. And so we're going to be trying to implement methods to prevent that from happening. Now, this was done under prior administration where somebody may have missed that, right? And that's part of the problem with the drawings not being carefully reviewed right before they're submitted, right before the vote. So we're not going to allow that anymore. So all the commissioners will have had a chance to review the drawings before we vote on the drawings. Okay. So, because that might have been a situation where, for instance, there was no review, it was just going to a vote, and there was supposed to be no change, and who knows, maybe there was a change, right? Which we've experienced, unfortunately. Okay.
Item number 12, 19497BZ, 84-12, 164 Tweeds.
Okay. We have proof of service of initial application and of notice of hearing to officials. Community Board recommends approval. We have Fire Department letter of no objection. They need to check the address of the site. The block and lot doesn't match the address. I think it should be 161-35 and 161-37 84th Road, according to Biz. That would be for lot 9792, lot 137, and 31. The site looks reasonably good, but the dumpster needs to be stored in the enclosure, and paving, in an enclosure which needs to be made, and paving needs to be resurfaced. Also, is the planting in place as shown on the approved plans? It looks like the amount of planting was reduced along the oil tanks at the rear. This use is adjacent to residences on both sides, so that wasn't necessarily an okay reduction. And if the oil tanks are deep, I think there's soil on top, and there's no reason why they can't be planted. Oil tanks are usually located really deep, so, I don't know. They need to provide photos of all the perimeter conditions, including the fencing and planting, and of the rear and sides of the building. And this is to understand the relationship of all of those sides to the adjacent residences. And is the proposal to enlarge the building? That's quite confusing. This is not mentioned in the statement of facts, but is shown on the drawings as if an enlargement proposed. It looks like the extension, though, actually was built pursuant to the prior approval. So the drawings need to be corrected to reflect as-built conditions and state whether they're compliant with the approved drawings. And we need a lumen spread diagram. Anybody else? No. That's it. Okay.
Appeals calendar, continued hearings, item number 13, 215-15A, 144-14, 181st Street, Queens.
Okay, on February 7th, DEP provided a letter of no objection. It's a conditional letter that says, provided the drainage plan is amended, so that would be a condition of our approval, and I can read what, or we can just take from DEP the exact wording.
Sure.
And modify it as appropriate for the resolution. There was a ton of back and forth on this, and eventually the applicant agreed to amend the drainage plan.
I also had the applicant to add the sprinklers to the plans. They were notations.
Oh, they did add them.
They did.
Yeah, they did.
That was the thing. They submitted drawings and they added notes saying sprinklering
They
and
wasn't
some
there
other
before,
stuff. Yeah.
so Let's have them added.
Okay.
Item number 14 and 15, 2017-16A through 2017-19A. This is 1558 62 Clintonville Street, 150-93-95 Clintonville Court, Queens, and 2018, number 15, 2018-105A, 15087 Clintonville Court, Queens.
Okay, so this has been around a long time. And, you know, we learn a lot as these cases come. We had asked the applicant to go through the GCL 36 findings to establish that there's a hardship. And I think the applicant misunderstood and assumed also no ability to obtain a GCL 35 waiver, which doesn't have a hardship finding, right? So the as-of-right site plan with a GCL 35 waiver would have had 3 buildings on it, presumably 3 two-families. So I ask in that event, what's the hardship? What's wrong with 3 two-families on the lot instead of 5 two-families on the lot? Like, why is that a hardship? Fire department provided a conditional sign-off, which would be a condition of approval, assuming approval, where they required a number of elements because of the concern about the access to the lots at the rear, which included creating an joining open space declaration and an access driveway declaration. A number of documents were provided, and fire department had requested, and they now issued a letter of no objection in response because they reviewed them, but we add them as conditions to make sure they get recorded and so on. And the last question is, so there's these 2 documents, one of which is a restrictive deck for let's say, for the future maintenance of the roadway and to enter into an HOA, which I don't know whether council has signed off on.
So there was a submission, I issued comments to one set, but there was a revised.
There was a reply, which I forwarded to you last week.
I haven't looked at that yet, but I'll look at that today.
And then recommendation, because there was a submission, please, when, for the applicant, when you're submitting documents that need to be revised reviewed by council, call council and say, I submitted them, otherwise.
No, I saw I was CC'd on the email. I just
you
didn't have
were?
a chance to look at
Okay.
it.
All
So
right, that's fair.
it wasn't the
Okay.
applicant's error.
Okay. All right, other comments on this?
I have nothing further, but I agree with you, Jen.
Okay.
Okay, move on? New cases, item number 16, 2018-151A, 6-05, 129th Street, Queens, we still need DOT.
Oh, okay. We have proof of service of initial application and of notice of hearing to officials. Community Board recommended denial with 33 to disapprove, 7 to approve. The Community Board sent many questions to the applicant before voting to disapprove, but did not explain in its recommendation the reason for their decision. Community Board brings up some very good points about cutting off access entirely to 2 tax lots, number 36 and 34. DOT, we did get DOT comments. We got a DOT submission.
But they're responding to, I think this is the one.
Oh, okay. So
Maybe
I'd like to know, though, was DOT aware, they probably weren't, that the result of this will be to landlock 2 tax lots? And I'm actually not sure who's in charge of that. So I know somewhere in some common law, it's not legal to create landlocked properties, like anywhere in at least New York State, but it might be most of America, right? Because then there has to be an implied easement over somebody else's property to access it, right? So it's cut off, and the applicant's response to the Community Board's very intelligent observation was, we didn't create it, the city created it, not our problem. Which is maybe one reason why the Community Board said, wrong answer.
Yeah, there was certain statements made in the DOT letter, and I asked the applicant if they had sent a response to DOT, and they said they were working on it with, as of
Right.
Wednesday, they were working on it with the architect, and we're going to respond. So I don't know if that
Right.
works, if that solves anything, or...
So I don't know if it solves anything, but I'm quite serious about this. How can you possibly landlock a site? Now, I don't know how you get to that site in the first place, because it's not an open and improved street. So it might be that those 2 sites are owned in tandem by the site that does have access, in which case, that's the implied easement from that other side, right? So I think it's a combination of the applicant has to notify all 3 sites, all 3 tax lots, the 2 that are cut off, and the one that has access from the other route, so that, you know, if they don't have an objection, then it means they're traveling over their own property. Okay, so there's that, and if there is no response, then I think like DOT council or something needs to be spoken with, because how in the world can we allow this if it landlocks sites, which I'm fairly certain is illegal?
If there's no response from the applicant?
No, from the neighbors. So I think applicants should notify the owners of those 3 tax lots.
Okay. Okay.
And then, and because the owner may say, oh, not a problem, I own those,
Right.
the ones, the 2 to the rear of me, and it's all, I treat it as all mine, and I just never develop them. And someday I will, and then I'll provide access. That depends on a GCL 36 waiver. But anyway, okay. And then the next is, we do have DEP sign off, and DOT had comments, and I guess there's a response to those comments, so we need DOT again. And I know this is for a GCL 36 waiver. 35 waiver, but the zoning lot is divided into several parts. It's a very complicated zoning lot, including an R31 in which only 1 and 2 family dwellings are permitted. So I don't believe the floor area and density calculations can include any of the area in the R31 where that use is not permitted. So you can't do an adjusted maximum floor area ratio where the use isn't permitted in the thing that you're adjusting with. The applicant needs to verify that this is how the project has been analyzed, which I don't think it has. The R32 lot area is 14,400 square feet, so an allowable FAR is 0.5, so only 7,200 total square feet is permitted, plus the area under a sloping roof, 20%. The proposal is for a 12,000 square foot building, so it's clearly relying on the floor area in the R31. This is a use regulation, not a bulk regulation, so section 77-11 applies. I don't even know if this is a pre-61 lot, because it looks like it's just a collection of haphazard lots that were purchased, so I doubt it's pre-61, so then it wouldn't even qualify. And DOB, the objection sheet that was provided to us to show that they're signed off for flood regulations shows no sign-offs for any of DOB's other objections, all of which, or many of which, had to do with this
Zoning.
very subject. So DOB did a very thorough review, and I don't see sign-off for any of that. So I don't even know if this project is allowed. And what we see often with these GCL 35 waivers, in fact, always, is when the applicant tries to change the shape of the building or something like that, DOB bounces it back to us for a letter of no objection or something, right? So I'm not really sure why they want to pursue this thing if it's not even a permitted use, bulk, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Anybody else?
I think it would be helpful to get a map. My difficulty with this was trying to understand the subject lot and the other lots that are going to be affected by the demapping and where the demapping street is. So it would be helpful if an overlay of all of these are shown in one graphic form to help understand the extent of the landlocking and lack of access to the sites.
Right.
I had a lot of difficulty trying to figure that out.
I did it by going onto the digital tax map. I couldn't use anything that was provided there. And the digital tax map showed the relationship of this tax lot collection to those two lots, and also shows its relationship to the street that runs, that provides access to the third lot that's not relying on that former road, or, right? So you actually can see it there. See, it's these down here. And there is a road that, well, it's not shown on, yeah,
Well, this road was demapped.
right,
This was the whatever.
right. But so there's all those landlocked lots, like there's this one that faces on 7th Avenue that looks like one big long tax lot. And that's lot 55, for
This one.
example, and lot 27, and I don't actually know how you get to those.
Right.
There's no street shown on the tax map, so.
So I think there must be an easement from lot 27 to these other buildings, all of them.
Yeah,
28, 30, 27.
Right, must be that. But then how in the world do you get to lot 31?
But I think, point well taken, but I also don't think we can focus on this because these are already built and
No,
they've
they
been
are.
built with the understanding of some access has been provided. The question of these ones we need to better understand.
Right, exactly.
36, 34, 31,
Right.
and 60.
So, and maybe, actually, you know what I would say in terms of notification? It's not just to lots 36, 34, and 31, it's also lot 60, and
Yeah.
then to
Those
notify
four.
those, and also the adjoining lots all around, so lot, what is that, 8?
But 8 has access on 129.
No, I'm saying lot 8 may own lot 60, and so if you sent a notice to the owner of a vacant, unused lot, it may just, lie in the
I think they
street.
can just go through Acris and find out who has ownership of which property and kind of.
Yes. So but I think, notifying all of the adjoining property owners who have adjacency to those landlocked lots might reveal that they own that landlocked lot. This is in an effort to help them figure it out. If you just send them a letter to a vacant lot, it may just lie in the street. You can't deliver it. So, okay. No other comments?
No.
Item number 17, 2019 1A through 2019 5A. This is Nello Court, Staten Island.
Right. We have proof of service of initial application and of notice of hearing to officials. Community Board recommends denial with 20 to deny and 6 to approve, citing the deliberate creation of a private road in this case to create more lots where the site already fronts on a mapped street. Arguably a similar condition to what we saw at Clintonville, right? So I don't see any comments from the Borough President's office on this one.
I'll reach out again.
Yeah.
This was Veronica's case, so I was trying to
Right.
follow up on a bunch.
City planning certified for school seats and subdivision.
Yep.
Which, as I understand it, looks at protection of topography and protection of existing trees. I'm not getting out completely, so I don't understand in terms of city planning's review. There are no existing trees. The site is being completely raised, and leveled and paved. So I don't even understand that review, right?
Yeah, I think in this case, this may have been just perfunctory because it falls in that area that one needs to go through, because these were former residential homes. 3 of these sites,
Oh, right.
three of these lots had homes in them, and now they're being, or maybe of the 3, 2 had homes, and the other one was like a garage structure of some sort. So they were being used for some they were not green pastures, let's put it this way.
They were previously developed.
Yeah.
They were previously developed. So I think the process that the city planning reviewed was more as, because it falls in the district, and because of the subdivision, you had to check all the boxes.
Right, I see, okay. We do have fire department conditional sign-off. Their conditions are all proposed residential occupancies must be fully sprinklered, 3 parking spaces for each 2-family dwelling required, a serviceable hydrant must be located within 250 feet of all main front entrances. We have a DEP letter of no objection, which states that the proposed sanitary and storm conditions will be maintained by the owners, members of the homeowners association, not by the city of New York. This lot has 140 feet of frontage on a map street. That's a lot of frontage. Often these things are a little bitty, 20 feet of frontage. How do I get to the back of my property, right? In this R3X zoning district, 3 lots, each with frontages of 46 feet, would allow development of 3 very nice-sized 1- or 2-family houses with approximately 4,800 square feet each on complying lots that would not require any waivers and would use all of the available floor area in building sizes comparable to those found in the immediate neighborhood. In fact, there are 4 1- and 2-family houses immediately adjacent to the site, built in the early 2000s with between 4,000 and 6,000 gross square feet. That's the information I get from the various databases. So I ask, how is this a hardship under the findings of GCL 36? I agree with the community board. Your neighbors built these really nice houses just next door. Why not build 3 really nice houses next door to them? The site plan shows the subject buildings are 3 stories, although we don't have any elevations or building plans. If they are 3 stories, which I'm not sure if they are, I just think it's 2 stories. Badly. The site plan says 3 stories, so they're counting the cellar. Section 107-462 requires minimum side yards of 8 feet with a total width of 20 if it's a 3-story building, so somebody's right, but it's the same applicant. So if the hardship finding were met, and in my mind it has not been met, and we were to proceed with this, the HOA has to be revised to account for all maintenance of the sidewalks, roadbeds, and utilities, and the maintenance of DEP and fire department conditions, and a restrictive deck recorded against each property for same. Pursuant to GCL 36, a performance bond and a certificate of insurance should be provided in favor of DOT to guarantee completion and maintenance of the roadbed. The builder's pavement plan should be revised to show the same standards applying to the private road as to Sprague Avenue, which is our standard. Yeah, I'm not feeling good about this one. Others?
There were three structures that existed here, all of which fronted on a map street and were consistent with the character of the surrounding community. So the first step is that these lots front on a map street.
Right.
So just in that, you're not permitted to ask for a GCL 36 because it's GCL 36 are only for non-fronting. The second part is we don't get to the hardship argument already, but if we were to entertain it, you or your predecessor cannot create a hardship, a circumstance, and claim that there's a hardship as a result of same. And that's what it seems like they're trying to do. Even in a variance case where you don't get to build whatever you want. There are rules, and we have to enforce them.
I think of the 3 lots, one was landlocked. So there was development on 2 of them, and the other one had more like uses that was not directly needing access to the site. You're right, there were 3 structures, but one was not a habitable structure.
Access to the street, you mean?
Right, access to the street. I think my concern, and not so concern, is the reason for the request is the zoning resolution allows for minimum lot size. And in this case, the proposal would provide all the required minimum lot sizes. If these 3 lots, an as-of-right development does allow for 3 lots, they will be fronting on a map street. The depth of these lots would be much more than what typically the new development that was built through the large-scale residential development immediately to the south, I think, along the Sprague Port Road was more, the depth of those lots are much less than
But the lots to the north
Yeah, the
are
lots-
identical.
Yeah, the lots adjacent to both, on
So
both
they're-
sides
yeah,
are
yeah,
identical.
they're
I don't
lots to the
dispute
north and
that,
to the east.
But I think those are the older development, and the newer developments are resulting in much smaller lot sizes. They're meeting the required zoning requirements. So I think my question is, if you're able to build up to the zoning requirement, and the zoning allows it, and there are you do have to go through subdivision, I'm just kind of putting a question out there.
But in this case, you can use all your floor area, and the houses that result are the houses that you see that were just built in the early 2000s, right?
And in any event,
Super nice ones.
in any event, this is not what this section of the zoning resolution was created
It's not
for.
zoning resolution, it's general city law.
It's a general city law, it was created for. This is not an avenue for that relief.
I'll also just note that unlike other, or many applications we see, we're not looking at redeveloped land
Yeah.
on GCLs, we're typically looking at never developed land that's being developed for the first time. So I wonder how that would. So the site was developed previously with 2 residences? And so how does that history,
Need to be reviewed to see.
We have had many GCLs through the past decade and then some, that is on redeveloped land.
oh yeah?
Yes, we have, where there's usually been one very old house or maybe 2 very old houses that are demolished to make way for new developments of different types. So I
So
don't
not
see,
unusual.
previously, that has not been an issue that
Okay.
has prevented the board from voting in favor of that kind of a waiver. But, hey, maybe there are new board practices now, and we'll have to wait and see.
And we're learning as we go, right? You learn with situations once you see them in the field.
I believe we should, on a case like this, I think we should step back and think about the purpose for the GCL 36. We should think about this. If it is made just for sites that are not fronting on map street, I believe we should be wrapping the book and just move forward. This is not, they have fronting on a map street. So it's F then for me. If this is mapping on a fronting street and the GCL is created just for sites that are not mapping on a fronting street, we should not be talking about this case for probably more than 5 minutes. If the hardship play here could be like implemented, let's say, like, I'm not sure if what I'm gonna say is totally accurate, but for the previous case, if the site just has like little frontage and using the map street for access would create a 20-foot wide site, and that site is very deep, and which will lead to like wasting the majority of the site area. I would think of that as a hardship. But again, if the GCL is made for a site that is just not mapping on a fronting street, on a mapped street, I'm not sure what we can do about this. But if there is an opening there, yes, we can start talking about the hardship story. For this site, is there a hardship story? I'm not sure. Three houses, the difference between 3 houses and 5 houses, is there like a significant difference here in income and return? I am not sure.
Even if
Can
there
I
is,
make
this
a
isn't
statement
happening.
here?
Yeah,
Hold on,
yeah,
'cause
but just,
haven't
I just
spoken
want him to
yet.
finish his sentence.
Yeah, he finished his sentence,
Okay.
and before Commissioner Shabeta
Yeah, yeah.
gets in there, I just want to state something. I find those comments that you just made to be actually quite confusing, because GCL 36, not fronting on a map street, is for lots where the portion of the lot that's being developed is not fronting on a map street. Most of these sites have some portion of the lot that's fronting on the map street.
Yeah, sure,
The
but-
point is that they want to develop the part that isn't fronting on the map street or doesn't have the suitable amount of frontage space. So for him to say that if a lot is not fronting on a map street, we shouldn't even be spending 5 minutes on it,
No,
but that's...
no, that's not
No, I didn't
actually
say
what he
that.
said.
Yeah.
No, that's not what he said. In this case, they have 140 feet of frontage, and they can easily develop the 140 feet using up all the floor area. So it's not even like they have to say, oh, we have to leave some on the table, right? But if instead it's a site that goes back 400 feet, and it's frontage on the map street, which we see quite often, and it's frontage on the maps, or in one case, we had 900 feet, right? It goes back, right? And the frontage on the map street is just, for argument's sake, it's 50 feet. Then you've got this 50 by 900 foot site, and all you can do is build one house on it, because the minimum frontage requirement, or the minimum lot width requirement is, say, 40 feet, and you've got 50, so that's one house, right? So I think that's what he's talking about. You've got a 50,000 square foot zoning lot, and you can only build a 4,000 square foot house on it, because that's all that will fit, right? And so I think that's where you're talking about not being able to make reasonable use of the property, as opposed to a situation like this where you can make full use of the property, but you're choosing instead. I mean, we do see variances like that, where regular variances, where there's the I want versus it's a hardship. And so I think
Well,
that's the distinction.
True. Number one, though, this isn't a variance.
No, I know, but there's still a hardship
So-
finding.
Right, but it's not the same hardship finding as the variance finding,
Well,
because we're not seeing a full financial. Is that what we're requesting now, that developers now give us a full financial analyzing whether or not what they can build as of right is not feasible? Because that's what I'm getting from the conversation here.
right.
Yes,
Well,
I believe.
And so then, are we now going to require a whole list of new requirements for this? Maybe they should just come in and ask for a variance. I'm
well,
not
but
getting
so-
this.
okay, so just
This
to-
is getting
to get-
harder and harder
It
and
is getting-
harder for people to meet the standard, and it just seems to me that the charter of the Board of Standards and Appeals is to be that release valve for developers. Well, that release valve is getting tighter and tighter and tighter and opening even less. Well, I think we're just going to end up voting ourselves out of a job, frankly, because soon there will be nothing that we could approve of.
Well, but I think that's taking it much further, because we're not saying, because of essentially what Commissioner Sheta said, where you do have a situation where you cannot take full advantage of the site, or not even full advantage. You can't take much advantage of it, right? Where you, in the scenario I gave, 50 foot of frontage, 900 feet back. what do you do with it? Turn it into a playground, basically, because there's only one way in and only one building allowed, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the situation. But if you read the GCL 36 text, and I've been doing a lot of that recently and parsing it into all of its interesting parts that I haven't looked at as carefully up until now. The hardship finding, there is a hardship finding, and the direction is that the way that you look at it is the way that area variances are granted. And unfortunately, that's a language from state law, right? Because they grant area variances different from use variances, right? And we don't have that kind of distinction in our 7221. But in fact, the instruction is that you need to make a hardship finding. Now, how we do it and whether it needs to be done through financials and all that is another question. But I think in this case, this is kind of a super obvious one that confronted us. And you know, I know the community boards. These community boards have a lot of trouble with these GCL waivers in general, but this is a situation where they brought up a really good point, and I think that it's one of the few that we see where it's so clearly not experiencing any trouble, except that the developer wants to have more houses on the lot.
Like even some
right?
variance cases, when you get a variance that's based on something that's very obvious, we don't give the applicant hard time by requesting tons of technical documents, financial analyses. We just look at it and yes, it's clear cut. This guy has a hardship and it could be easily evaluated, so let's move forward. I believe, and in the zoning resolution, correct me if I'm wrong, I didn't see any language in the zoning resolution calling for like a financial analysis and this kind of
No, this
wording.
is a
Financial-
state law.
No,
Right.
I'm
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
about the variance cases. The
Right,
variance
it doesn't.
cases.
You're right.
It says it has to be proven that there is a hardship. It's a very similar language.
No. The language in the zoning resolution is that you need to prove that there is an economic impact, right? So there is something that directs you to reasonable return, right? So the only way you can prove a reasonable return or lack thereof is by doing a financial analysis. The problem with the GCL text is that it is instructing us to look at the hardship in terms of area variances. And because in New York City, we don't have the distinction between area and use variances, the way it exists in the rest of New York State, we have to somehow or other figure out what the standard is when we ask. And the board has not been asking up until recently to make a hardship case. And recently we've been asking, you need to make a hardship case. It's one of the findings in the GCL text, right, in the law. And so discovering how they make the finding is kind of a work in progress, and we're trying to find out what do the courts think we should be doing, what do other municipalities do in this situation, and so on. I don't actually, we still don't know what they do, right? But let me just finish and in terms of facilitating developers, yes and no, right? We also have the requirement to make sure that we don't wreak havoc on the neighborhood. So happy to help developers when it's a reasonable thing to do to alleviate problems, but not to create something that the community, that will hurt the community or that will change the nature of the community. Zoning exists for a reason,
And in
right?
accordance with the law, and in
Right.
accordance with the statute. And if the statute says something explicitly, we can't simply, we have to give it its weight.
Can I just?
I think that the case law, I think we also have to give it its weight, and we have to move forward responsibly with that, with this information and this view of it.
Can I just say something? I think this site, just similar to some of these other cases where we had looked at in the past, given the depth of this site, let's say the developer does break it up into 3 lots, each lot being 210-foot long and 40-foot wide. Each of these property owners can at a later date come in for GCL 36 to build a property, to build a house in the rear yard, in the rear portion of the lot, through an easement through its site. So at the end, you will have 6 lots with 3 curb cuts on Sprague, as opposed to currently 1 curb cut off Sprague, providing access to 5 homes. So there is something called good planning as opposed to bad planning. Now, there are existing homes along that where they can today can come, like lot 222, which is the next lot, which is 40 foot long, over 210 feet, 40 foot wide, 210. Today can come in for GCL 36.
They don't need to, actually,
Why?
because there are existing houses, they're fronting
Well, there is
on,
an existing house, but they have enough floor area to build another home in the rear. And right now, as Staten Island Borough, they have determined that 2 homes on the same zoning lot would require GCL 36 and would come in for 36. We have seen those cases where you have a building
House
in the
behind
rear,
a house.
house behind a house. A lot of these lots are eligible for house behind a house based on our last 3 years of practices. And same thing can be practiced on this 3 lots if they are subdivided by what we are recommending. They can build to whatever floor area they want and reserve excess floor area for a lot behind, house behind a house. How is that a good planning when you have where you'll have 3 curb cuts as opposed to 1 curb cut providing access for so many homes? I do think that is a factor that one needs to look at when looking at, because zoning allows it. The question is, what is a good plan? I don't think it solely should rest on hardship. It should be a combination of both.
well, so, I mean, for us to start being the zoning czars, this is something that this is really city planning's problem. So the house behind the house is really a serious problem in Staten Island that needs to be addressed by city planning or other legislation, because it's one after the next after the next. But I don't think that that's actually the question before us, to try to imagine how they could take advantage of this and piecemeal it and so on. The question is, are they experiencing a hardship? That's the only finding we're supposed to make. Are they experiencing a hardship? And did they provide a performance bond? And did they provide insurance? That's actually the questions before us. And it's not to anticipate what city planning should have done and shouldn't have done and what they might do in the future, because we're not supposed to be planning with these houses. And the only thing we're supposed to be doing is trying to make sure that the roadway is properly built and properly maintained and all of that sort of stuff, which is what the GCL is about.
Right.
So this is,
And it doesn't, and we don't, this isn't this wouldn't go against development. If that site wanted to be developed that way, there is an avenue for it. I just do not believe that avenue is a GCL 36. There are other avenues for that.
as in a mapping.
But isn't the opinion that's being espoused here a zoning SAR kind of opinion, because you're making a judgment call as to what you think is appropriate development versus what isn't appropriate development, and you don't even have financials to base your statement on? I'm not getting this.
No, so it isn't actually, it's simply saying, the owner says, I have a hardship, and in the result of the hardship, I need to have 5 or 6 houses, whatever it is, on this site, right? But when you look at how much frontage they have, it's a lot of frontage, and they can build 3 houses that fully uses all of the floor area, so it doesn't need actually a financial analysis. You can use all your floor area. The floor area, it'd be different, like if this were a neighborhood where there were no 4,000 square foot houses, all the houses are 900 square foot houses, then you could argue, nobody's going to buy a 4,000 square foot house in this neighborhood. It's not the neighborhood. So then the neighborhood, the typology of the neighborhood says little houses, therefore makes sense arguably that you should have little lots. But here you just look at the satellite and you see gigantic houses just built next door, and you see lots that are the same depth,
Right.
all the way up and down the road.
But if they satisfy the minimum lot area, and lot width with their site plan, then why are we saying no if they're saying it's a hardship to have less of those? They're not asking for a variance on the number of residences, so to speak. They're asking for a variance because the residences aren't fronting on a mapped street.
Right.
But they've satisfied minimum lot size and minimum lot width, and they're not running afoul of the maximum unit size or maximum home size. The only thing they're asking for a waiver from
Right.
is that they're not fronting on a mapped street, because unfortunately, in certain areas of the city, the blocks are mapped out in such a way that they are not providing reasonable access given the size of the lots. So aren't you making a zoning judgment call by then saying, no, this should only be 3 homes developed here because 3 homes can have clear access to the street, and we like that better?
But so my problem is then, what's the meaning of that hardship finding? According to that, every single one should get a waiver, 100%. They're all going to one access from, in these different ways, right? Therefore, there's zero, we just ignore the hardship finding. It's like it doesn't happen. You have to give it, you have to acknowledge that that's a requirement.
Yes, and you can acknowledge it based on that basically they've satisfied all, they're not asking for any zoning waivers. They're going to provide the type of development that's actually conceived of given the zoning district. But for the fact that they don't have access on a mapped street.
But everybody will qualify then. 100% of the applicants qualify. Therefore, there is no situation where you have a hardship that disqualifies.
Right, but why shouldn't they benefit in an area that hasn't been mapped reasonably? The blocks are too wide in Staten Island. The streets are too few and far between. And so you get situations where tax lots are abnormally deep.
But that sounds like a zoning czar there as well. You're making judgments. All I'm saying.
How's it a judgment? I'm
all I'm
looking at the
saying-
blocks,
all I'm-
and the typical discrete tax lot is 100-foot depth.
Okay, and all I'm
Yet here,
saying.
you're double that depth. How is that making a judgment call? That's not making a judgment call, it's just looking at the map.
All I'm saying is that the statute itself, we have to follow the instruction by the statute. And the statute is not a release valve for this type of development.
Yeah, meeting the minimum lot size is a zoning requirement, but waiving the GCL waiver, the 36 GCL waiver requires a condition here, which is having a hardship. And I believe we should look at this first. And if they have hardship, yes, I would go with a better planning than like a more poor planning. But let's take a look at what is called in this waiver. They need to prove it to us that they have a hardship. Having 3 houses is not going to be fruitful for them.
I just to piggyback on what, Commissioner Otley-Brown said, and question Commissioner Shetta's statement of proving a hardship. In this case, if we have to prove a hardship of 3 versus 5, it goes to the financials. It's really, I don't see any other way of proving the hardship here. And that's not what's before us. Again, I think the history of the rezonings and text amendments that has happened in this borough of Staten Island, and especially with regards to the South Richmond Special District and the lower density growth management, enormous amount of thought and process has gone into to ensure that there wouldn't be subdivision of lots in a manner that would not be consistent with the zoning regulations. So every zoning lot that is going to be subdivided has to meet some of the minimum requirements and lot sizes. So, and this recognized the fact that there are lots that are unusually large, not your typical 20 by 100, not your typical 40 by 100 lots. These are unusually large sites where where subdivisions never occurred. People were just sitting on it like homesteads, and then over time, as they realize there is need for housing, or they don't need such a huge property because they're not farming on it, they started subdividing. And so this is kind of what we're seeing, a change that is happening. And I think we need to be cognizant of that is taking place. And these are not that many homes that we are talking about, where I know we have gone about this other project that was on Richmond Road, which had 50 units or something, and the question was, should we be granting GCL for 50 versus 5?
29 or
So,
35.
okay, I don't remember the number, but the question was, should we be, like, over 5, should GCL be granted, below 5? So I think we're really putting together sets of stringent rules without proper, I have not seen the argument yet strongly that says why we should not be granting in this case. All I see this, you have a piece of lot which is enormously big, where as of right, 5 buildings can be provided that meets all the regulatory controls of the zoning, and it results in better site planning by providing one means of access as opposed to several means of access on a street that is not very wide. And that's kind of how the Sprague Court was done. It was
Sprague.
I'm sorry.
You're making it sound very fancy, but.
Sprague.
Sprague. Yeah, I think it's Sprague.
Sprague.
But I'm sorry, pardon my English. So the Sprague Court one was also a lot that had that was very deep, and therefore to allow for the development, they used one access point and broke it up into lots, so that you could have development further into the depth of the lot, which was not close to Sprague. So it's not an uncommon practice. It's a change that is happening. It may not have happened totally, but it is a change that's happening. That's all I
We're
can
not
say.
legislation, we have to follow the law.
But if I could suggest, just because
We
there's a
move
lot
on.
of circling,
Yeah.
that it's their application to make. The GCL requires them to show that there's a hardship. There's been some discussion about what the hardship could be. But if we could move away from speculating and just put it on the applicant to
Yes,
address
right.
all of the comments that have been made here, they kind of understand where the 5 are coming from and maybe what information they need to provide to change some people's minds if necessary. But maybe we can just let them address that tomorrow.
Yes, I agree. Thank you. Moving on.
Zoning calendar, number 18, 2018-64BZ, 2018-65A, 725 Mobile Road, Queens. This application is requesting to be withdrawn.
Right, and I just wanted to say that the applicant states that the property was sold to another buyer, but requests that it should be without prejudice, but since it was sold, I think it should be with prejudice, because this applicant is no longer the applicant, right? So,
Also, I'll just note that the application was closed and then it was requested withdrawal, which is why there can be a discussion about with or without prejudice.
why there can be a
Why- yeah.
discussion. Oh, I
Because
see,
There's the
okay.
requirement in our rules, or the note that it shouldn't be without prejudice unless certain things.
Right, okay, so I think it should be with.
Continued hearing items, item number 19, 2017-20BZ, 550 Fifth Avenue, Brooklyn.
It's been a year since we last heard this application, with 3 adjournments in between. A revised feasibility study was prepared and concludes that for as-of-right retail use, $35 a square foot in rent would be the market condition, and would include $35 a square foot for the cellar area as well. My understanding is the cellar is usually half the price, so you wouldn't have as much income from that as-of-right retail as the numbers suggest. And also, so I'm confused about the determination on that one. And I also don't understand why the rental rates are different for the as-of-right commercial and as opposed to the PCE. The PCE is instead based on PCEs, and the thing that's quite confusing is the PCEs are actuals, and the rentals are ask rates, and the PCEs are coming in at $27 a square foot. So everything is working at the disadvantage of that existing use, and meanwhile, it's going to cost $2 million to convert the existing use to a plain vanilla box. So when I, in my head, redo the math, I see that the income for the PCE is much better than the income for converting this to a plain vanilla box as of right. So I kind of don't understand the applicant's effort or the financial analyst's effort to kind of make them look like they have the same return. It doesn't make sense.
So it's actually interesting, and I really believe that what it comes down to is an appraisal group that is trying to be as true to the statistics that they find out there in the field as they can be, and not willing to take the liberties that they could take in order to make their argument. So instead of taking into account the fact that, you know, retail rents are also used for PCE rents because PCEs occupy retail space, you know, which would then at least give you the same rental for the proposed that you want. They instead are like, well, for PCEs, we have to find exactly PCE rents. And so they're searching around far and wide in this area because they're not located anywhere close if you look at the map. And what they find are contract rents for PCE, they're actually lower than asking rents. Well, contract rents are usually lower than asking rents.
Right.
So now it's an apples and oranges thing. Then, when the whole argument here is that actually having to go back to an as-of-right retail use would entail conversion costs, and then also probably be hard to lease up because it's retail, and we all know the situation that we're having with retail, both nationwide and citywide. They don't even broach that topic. They stay very true to what's allowed as vacancy for commercial, and they stick to that regardless of whether or not it's retail or PCE. So you don't have that much difference in income due to vacancy. And so the result is their returns analysis really comes down to an Ackerman formula analysis for developing the cap rate, and then a statement that says that a 6.1% cap rate just isn't in the acceptable range for commercial on Staten Island. So when I look at it, if I were to give them, number one, the same allowance of retail rents for the PCE as well as the as-of-right use, and the allowance to take a larger deduction for vacancy and collection for the as-of-right rental retail use, you would see that the return, the difference in return between the 6.1 and the 6.5% would be much wider.
Okay.
So, given that, I think that they have done as good, as well as they can do.
Because they're not experienced
They're-
with making arguments.
They're not really
Right.
feasibility
Yeah.
analysts, they're appraisers. And it's kind of a different animal, they adhere to different appraisal standards, and if you look at their paperwork, often everything they say is discounted by, this statement was made in a complete vacuum on this day at this time, and we can't, you know, attest to the fact that this would be true if any one of our minor adjustments were changed and all of that. They're always so strict about their analysis, and I think a feasibility analyst has got a lot more leeway because they don't have to conform to appraisal standards.
And to that point, you're actually looking at whether the project's actually feasible, which is a different question than what are the comps.
Right, and what
Right?
they're also looking at is what is the value as of today, not necessarily which is more feasible. And that's interesting. What they're doing is, this is the value as of today for this is the value as of today for that, and not talking about which is more feasible. And when you go into the situation like that, you don't tell the feasibility story. And this is what we wanted them to do, was just tell the feasibility story. Tell what happens when you invest $2 million to demolish and reconstruct a unit and then not be able to market that unit successfully. That's what we wanted them to say, but they didn't do that.
Right.
But they gave us enough fuel for us to support that argument.
Right, okay. Because the other part of it is, and I'm not sure if you mentioned that, they already have a tenant. So in the PCE version, you're not putting it on the market looking for a PCE.
Right, well, that's what I said.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
difficulty of spending the $2 million to convert to an as-of-right use and not be able to successfully market it, not get anybody in because of the
Right.
state of retail.
Right.
Yes, so bird in the hand versus two in the bush.
Right, like no hold time versus a year or 2 years
Right,
or
and
3
this
years.
analyst did not take advantage of
Right.
any of that.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thanks. Anybody else? That was the open issue. I think that
Yes.
helps a lot. Okay.
Item number 20, 2017-34BZ, 311 Adams Avenue, Staten Island.
They requested an adjournment.
Right. Item number 21, 2017-244BZ, 2208 Bowler Avenue, The Bronx.
DEP sent a letter requesting additional information on noise. Their letter was from June 14th. This has been going on forever. So they need to respond. There were a lot of questions about the noise analysis.
Can I move on? Okay. Item number 22, 2018-16BZ, 974 Sackett Avenue, The Bronx.
We still don't have the community board recommendation, which we asked for last time. I don't see it anywhere in the folder. There are many letters opposed to this project, which I actually didn't see prior to the first hearing. I'm not sure whether I just missed it or whether that didn't make it into our folder, because they're dated from January, which was when our last hearing was. Neighbors come, and they're very helpful and sad. Neighbors complain of disrespectful management, noisy truck traffic operating at 3 a.m., and noise complaints filed, and someone actually submitted a copy of the complaints they filed, and issues with parking. So this site is described as non-storage garage, but without any more conversation about how it's actually being used. Why is the place being used at 3 a.m.? So I'd like to know, what are the hours of operation? What is the operation? How is the site used? Why is this such a disturbance to neighbors and so disrespectful of neighbors? I'd like our compliance officer to check it out, so if somebody could let Ted know. The area that is described as a garden on the drawings and they photographed is now a pile of dirt. I don't understand why they showed us a picture of a pile of dirt. And they showed the cracked sidewalk as having been repaired, which meant that they filled the little cracks in with a little bit of whatever you fill little cracks in with. That's not how you repair a sidewalk. It needs to be replaced. The fence and the concrete block wall were, though, nicely repaired and replaced. Graffiti coverage on the roll-down gates needs to be a full painting job, not just sort of spray where the graffiti is. Looks terrible. And what I'm getting in part from the neighbors is that this is not a respectful operation. So they're going to need to do a lot to establish that they should be allowed to continue. The neighbors were all opposed to its continuance. So. Anybody else?
Are we satisfied with the continuance of use? They have provided additional documents.
Oh, I didn't look at it carefully. Did anybody else look at the
I did.
continued use?
I thought that it filled in the gaps. The addition of the RPIE forms was helpful, even though some of them were owner-operated exclusions. But the others showed, like 2004, 2006, showed that it actually was rented to a tenant. I thought they filled in the gaps.
Okay. Great. Okay.
Item number 23, 2018-34BZ, 10202 Metropolitan Avenue, Queens.
The plans, this was a project where the drawings were just beyond terrible. The plans are a little better than they were before, but I still don't know where the front door to the PCE is, or where the egress stairs go when they egress, or why you have to leave the PCE in order to get to the other floors, either by stair or elevator. You actually, somehow or other, from some street or other, get into the PCE and either walk a long distance or a less long distance, and then go to the stairs to go up to or down to the other floors of the PCE. It's very, very confusing. I don't really understand who these people are who are doing the drawings. They don't seem like they have drawing experience, which doesn't really make sense. They're just they continue to be below standard, below any standard drawings. The fire department did issue a letter of no objection after inspection and issued violations, which they will follow up on, they say. Anybody else?
I had questions. The plan does not correspond with the photos. The applicant states that, I think this was in response to fire department, that no parking would be provided along the front lot line. And the photos show that there are a total of 8 parking spaces for these 3 tax lot. And if you were to kind of eyeball it, it would almost be like there would be 4 parking spaces on the front yard of lot 1 and 5. Now, the revised plan that has been submitted states that there will be no parking in the front lot. So which
one is it?
Which one is it, exactly?
Yeah.
And does it meet the parking requirement? Even though they're saying it can be waived, it's for the entire, all 3 lots, and I think there might be some sharing, so we need to better understand before those notes are put in.
I just want to pick up on that. It might be that whatever the agreement is with the landlord, or however this is working, they don't get any assigned parking spaces. Those are for somebody else. And then the question is, what about the parking requirement in general?
Right, and it's not PCE's to have a drawing that says no parking, because they're a tenant. So it has to be ultimately the owner that has to recognize that FDNY is not requiring any parking in the front yard for.
What do you mean?
Not
They're
allowing?
Not
Not
allowing?
allowing. I think that,
No,
that's what I
I-
gathered. That was one of the objections, and the site, because they said they revised the floor plan for the PC's space, doors and stairs info per FDNY, will revise the door swing of the cellar egress, and then they said, address the FDNY comment by directing the signs located on the front yard, no parking.
I'm not sure what that's referring to.
So-
Yeah, because it is, it's one of those little retail places where
Right.
people pull in to park,
Exactly.
right? So I'm not really understanding the no parking on the, yeah. So we need a combination of fire department to help us understand what they were getting at with their conditions. Okay.
Do we receive anything from the community board yet?
I think the last time they expressed no interest in reviewing
Yes.
the application.
Right.
Item number 24, 2018-95 BZ, 120 Avenue M, Brooklyn.
Getting there. The plans were revised to respond to some of our directions. The 4th floor was removed, and building height reduced from 55 feet high to 40 feet high, so that's an as-of-right height, with the street wall reduced from 35 feet high to 29 feet high, where 32 feet high is as-of-right in the Ocean Parkway Special District, and this height is based on the fact that it's an existing building, so they're just measuring to the top of the existing building. The revised statement of facts is incorrect in stating that the proposal is 4 stories. It's 3, so it should be corrected. Although a 15-foot setback is provided on East 2nd Street and may comply with the zoning resolution because at least one side is meeting that, that is the short frontage and is obstructed with a bulkhead. Only 10-foot setbacks are provided on the long end and the second short frontage, and I actually asked for clarification on how to read this section in the resolution from city planning. That was one of the questions we posed to them, because the zoning resolution says that in this Ocean Parkway Special District, you only have to comply on one frontage with this 15 feet, but then it doesn't tell you what to do on the other sides. You have no idea, whatever you want, I don't know. So, so we need to figure that out. Both the plans and the BSA zoning chart are very unclear about the applicable setback regulations and whether waivers are being sought. A better design with less impact on the community would move the bulkheads away from East Second and McDonald Avenues. The existing conditions show no bulkheads located at these street frontages. So the stairways could be moved away from the street wall and should be street wall line, since they're apparently not built as currently planned. And that would just move the stairwells in sort of over to past one classroom. Totally doable. It doesn't render the project not workable and all that stuff. We never received as-built, and the approved plans were ignored during construction, so we don't actually know what it looks like inside. But I do want to say that it was illegally built, and it was supposed to have had its bulkheads all the way in, according to the approved drawings and the ZD1. The second floor was supposed to have been pulled back to comply with zoning. So the drawings should have showed a bulkhead in a complying location, and presumably the bulkhead was started in that location, or not the bulkhead, but the staircases were started in that location. The floor area was reduced from 61,498 square feet with 2.74 FAR to 49,307 square feet with 2.18 FAR, where 1.25 FAR is as of right. We had asked at the last hearing that the third floor comply with setback requirements, but I don't see side yard setback compliance with section 23-632C, nor a mention of a need for that waiver or whether it is complying, because the side yard is fairly large. The side yard setback needs to be provided, or needs to be shown on the drawings that it is effectively provided, and it applies to the portion of the building that's more than 30 feet above the level of the side yard. With respect to the setbacks, the as-of-right drawing shows significantly greater setbacks than the proposed third floor, so I don't understand how the as-of-right and the proposed are pursuing the same sets of regulations. I didn't see parking calculations anywhere upon which the required parking conclusions are based. A shuttle service is being proposed to collect from a municipal lot, which I'll talk about a little later. I've gone systematically through Article 2, Chapter 3, like one section after the next, which is how you're supposed to do a zoning analysis, which applies to a community facility building in the Ocean Parkway Special Purpose District. So instead of community facility regs, it's residential regs that apply here. And there are other non-compliances not mentioned by the applicant, and for which waivers would need to be requested. Of note, there is a planting requirement in the R5, but because no front yards are provided due to the existing non-complying building, the second floor of which was constructed illegally, and the first floor, I think, was built prior to 1961, so it's an existing non-complying building. There's no place to put planting except on one side. So I'd like to know what the proposal is to soften the building with respect to this, which is 23-451. 23-463 limits the aggregate street wall width to 185 feet. The proposed is 224 feet long along Avenue M. City Planning Commission can authorize increases in street wall width when there is, quote, adequate articulation with setbacks, et cetera. So I'd like to understand again, what is the proposal to soften the building with respect to this requirement, understanding that the first floor was an existing legal non-complying building, but the second floor was built illegally. And this building is located adjacent to residence. What is the proposal to soften the look of the side elevation for the residential community and the property line from adjacent neighbors with fencing and plantings? In terms of programmatic needs, a new program was added known as the Self-Direction Program on the third floor that sounds like an office function involving fiscal management. I'd like them to explain why that can't be in another location, which they said that those other sort of back of the house office functions that used to be on the fourth floor are going to be located somewhere else. I'd like to know also why human resources, IT, agency maintenance, and quality assurance also can't be there. And the reason that I'm asking that is because then the third floor has some play that it doesn't currently have. The statement of fact states that central office functions won't be in the building, so I think those sound like central office functions. Also, if there are 179 staff, how are they to be distributed throughout the building? Upon what was that number based? The rooms don't indicate occupancies, and the program analysis doesn't show totals of occupancies. And does that exclude the ambulatory care staff? One of the reasons this is relevant is because ambulatory care is based on number of square feet in terms of parking, whereas community facility is based on number of occupants, right, in terms of parking. How did they determine that there are 129 occupants or staff members? And the revised EAS describes only 188 participants in the day HAB program and 179 staff, of which for some reason only 156 are included in the trip generation analysis. I don't understand that. Why is that? The statement of facts describes 724 participants. So how can that be such a huge disconnect? Please, the people who do these applications should read this stuff and actually note that there's discrepancies. We shouldn't be the ones who are noting this. The EAS states that 96% of the 188 day HAB participants will arrive by one of 9 vans or minibuses, buses dropping off at a 100-foot no standing zone on Avenue M, and which buses and vans will be parked off-site. We asked for information at the last hearing, where off-site? How does this work for regular drop-offs and pickups? And the proposed shuttle bus from the municipal lots, what about that? Where does that go? If it's a shuttle bus, it's presumably parked at the site and traveling at some level of frequency. What's the frequency? Where does it live? And what about also the shuttle buses from the municipal lots? Because I think there was going to be shuttle buses both from the lots and from public transit. And what about the parking? I'm suggesting, what about parking the vans in tandem in the side yard entering from East 2nd Street, where the side yard access to the rear parking is typical of the neighborhood? This is an area where everyone has a wide ribbon and they go to their parking garage at the back. So that would be consistent with neighborhood character to drive onto this lot and park. The lot has something like a 17.5-foot wide side yard. So that's very wide for cars and would even provide enough room for planting. The facility, I think this facility should not be yet another to assume that the city streets are the location for programmatic van and bus parking needs. This part of the city is absolutely plagued by buses that are just assumed that the city is their parking lot. The EAS concludes there will be demand for 55 parking spaces, which is more than the 47 required apparently by zoning, even though we don't have calculations, and little to no availability of on-street parking. How do we guarantee the maintenance of the shuttle bus to the municipal lots? That's a question to all of us for how to do this. The applicant must look into satisfying some parking needs on-site or off-site or something, because it's actually a problem where I foresee lots of double and triple parking and plagues of vans and so on. So there are a lot of open seeker issues.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
May I?
So they're going to do an e-designation of the hazmat, but DEP promised us by August 7th for air quality and noise, but we're trying to move that along. But since there's other stuff, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, hold on.
Okay. Did you want to add something, Carl? No, you were going to jump in with that, okay.
No, yeah, it was just, we had a conversation with DEP, so.
But we do have a sign off from LPC. Okay.
And we're just trying by tomorrow, and again, it seems like
There's
there's
too
other
many
outstanding
open
issues,
issues, yeah.
but we were just trying to get a sense of an anticipated response to the e-designation materials, just to schedule accordingly. But as soon as we receive that from DEP, we will provide it.
I, in my very initial hearing date, had actually asked about the use of the 17-foot side yard being used as a parking for drop-off and pick-up for patients, and relocating the entrances from the front of McDonald's to the rear for patients to be dropped off and picked up on the side. I did not get any response at that time, at least I don't have it in my note, as to why that is not feasible, so thank you for bringing that up, and I would like that to be clarified.
So one point to that, because I was looking at it as being how convenient a side lot, a side yard that goes right through from street to street, but actually it doesn't, because when it gets to
McDonald, it kind of
It
gets
hit-
up. It hits
it
the
hits
construction, right.
it, not the construction, it hits the staircase for
Right.
the elevated,
Right.
so that wouldn't work at all. But, so that means they wouldn't be able to do a turnaround unless they built the turnaround inside the building, which is doable, right? But they would have to drive up and do a turnaround. But by the way, this Ocean Parkway Special District for schools, and this isn't technically a school under the defined terms, but it's not a 7319. We're looking at it for deference as a school. But if it were a school, the Ocean Parkway Special District requires a drop-off zone. So,
Yeah.
okay. Anybody else?
Move on.
No other comments on this? Okay.
Item number 25, 1441G South Avenue, Staten Island. We are waiting for a letter from DOT also
Yeah. so-
regarding the other measures that the applicant has provided. We also did receive a letter from fire departments. We had asked them about the sidewalk, and they said no sidewalk should be permitted in the 30 by 30 foot apparatus road.
What is it?
Can
Sorry,
you
I didn't
repeat the
understand
last-
that. Say that.
I'm sorry. There was a discussion about DOT wanting a sidewalk in South Avenue, so one of the questions we had asked, that one of the applicant had stated that because this is 30 by 30 required fire apparatus road, that we asked fire department if there was an issue, and they said that they wouldn't permit the sidewalk.
Would
And that
not.
Would not with a
permit the
curb.
sidewalk.
But for instance, so school safety, so this is part of the problem, where school safety starts to look at this issue, after the whole deal is done, right? But for instance, they're concerned about students getting off on, what's the name of the road that's on the top?
South Avenue.
South Avenue. Is it South Avenue? Whatever, the school that's at the road that's on the north. School safety is saying, parents in their rush to get the kids to school and to move on are not going to do the whole loop and come into the private little roadway there and do a drop-off and stand in traffic while on their way out. They're going to say, this takes me another 20 minutes, I can't deal with this. So they're going to drop the kids off at that main road, and the kids are going to end up walking through the parking lot. And this is an active parking lot where there's all these people coming to their offices and so on, and school safety doesn't want the kids just walking through the parking lot. So they said, we want a sidewalk that goes continuously with understood breaks, because you've got it, the cars are driving between the parking lot. We want a sidewalk, which sort of exists, if you look at it in a kind of a way. There are these sort of islands that are created around the parking lot where the tree planting is supposed to be. Arguably, those little islands could become the sidewalk if that was pursued that way. But anyway, and so So the question is, how does this site provide something like a sidewalk? So another idea might be, what if it were stripes and some kind of protective bollards so that the fire trucks would like run over the protected bollards. I guess they're the bendy kind or something. I don't really understand how those things work. But, you know, something like that where kids have a safe zone to walk, and fire department still gets the width of its
Fire lane.
Fire
access
lane.
Yeah, so we asked DOT, what Jill had done is asked DOT to submit a letter, because there was so many emails back and forth with
Yes.
the applicant and everything. I think because the drainage system, the bioswale has already been constructed, and the fire access lane, I don't think they're gonna commit to the sidewalk, the
no,
applicant.
but so that's the
So they
thing.
want DOT, we want
Yeah,
DOT
yeah.
to sort of lay this all out in
Right,
the
but
letter,
so-
because there's
but-
so many emails.
Right, I understood, but you know, so the thing about the bioswale, not that I know much
Yeah.
of anything about a bioswale, but I'm assuming that it means because when you build a sidewalk, you have to dig up the asphalt and pour and put in reinforcing and all of that stuff. What we're talking about is a protective zone, right?
Right.
Which could be arguably striping with bollards if, flexible bollards, if fire department were okay with flexible bollards, or with some other kind of railing that is drive overable by a fire truck.
And
So,
DOT, I just a question, was DOT unsatisfied with any amount of like people, staff directing traffic?
they don't want it to, they want it to be a hard solution, not a people solution, because you can't regulate crossing guards. And, right, I mean, you would have to do hand-over-hand crossing guards all the way from, what is the name of the road?
We've done it
South
before.
Avenue.
South, oh, that is South Avenue, okay.
We've done crossing guards before.
They've changed their position. They don't believe crossing guards are a good solution. So DOT has changed their position in the last few months, where they see that crossing guards are not not an enforceable solution. So they want what I'm calling architectural solutions. So, you know, drop gates, other kinds of, you start to see now they're doing bulb outs, which we didn't see before, right? Where they pull the sidewalk and they make it even, the distance to cross the street shorter.
Right.
So, and that slows traffic down and so on. They're looking for all those kinds of things to solve it. And they pointed out, it didn't even occur to me that parents would drop off on South Avenue, but they pointed that out. So they were much more focused on the South Avenue drop-off than they were on the concentration of everything at the parking garage.
So with regard to the South Avenue drop-off, I just keep thinking about if this was in a regular city street, and we have dropping people coming off from the subway and stuff, we would generally do crossing guards. We can't ask them to make a new.
This isn't about crossing South Avenue. This is about walking
Through the parking.
several
Through the parking
thousand
lot.
feet through the parking lot without any place to walk for pedestrians, which is always like that in
Yeah.
parking lots. You just like, you're on your own. You park your car and you take
And
your
is the
chances.
applicant opposed to making a sidewalk?
Yes.
Yes, so the applicant's opposed, and they're
Applicant
using the
sidewalk as
excuses
requested.
like bioswales that it's going to interfere with.
Because
and-
that's already been built, apparently.
And what is the
Right, but
applicant
what, I
proposing?
don't know what that
Construction.
means to build it. I actually don't understand how that has anything to do with a sidewalk. You could still have a bioswale, arguably, with a sidewalk that does whatever it is a bioswale does, right? Permeable sidewalks, they exist all over the planet.
It's been constructed already.
Well, so, they wanted to add a new use.
I would
Right.
like the applicant to explain, I think in their statement, they stated something to the effect that they don't want anybody, let alone children, to walk through, they do not want to encourage any form of walking through the parking lot from South Avenue, not just children, but anybody visiting the building.
I guess a sidewalk would hurt that, right? Building the sidewalk would
Because
go
for
against
this,
that.
because of the safety issue.
Right.
They just do not want to add another layer of conflict between vehicles and pedestrian, regardless of whether it's a school pedestrian or an adult pedestrian. So they had proposed a sign saying no drop-off or pickup. What I would like is for them to explain how they can improve that permeability or make it more not possible through other means?
Do you
Do they
think-
have like a guard there that would prohibit people from walking through? What are the other means that they can exercise that would prevent it? Because
Do you think like perhaps like I remember when I was going to school, but we would get in trouble if we were dropped off. We would receive a demerit, be held after school, et cetera, if we were dropped off at a certain location. We
Your
were
parents are dropping you off. They should get the demerit.
And that's how they would
How
address
do you
it.
monitor that? That's the only problem is.
Yeah.
Once you put that restriction in place, you would have to stand there.
Yes.
And witness this and take photos and send the photos to the principal or have them camera the whole area so that the principal is watching those students
Right.
who are walking in. You've got to put in place some kind of practice that you can implement and monitor, not
Right.
just
You don't think a
give lip
policy?
service to.
I
Right.
just see this more as a solution for the entire complex. For if the owner is saying that's an issue, it's maybe they should have a guard there who prevents anybody walking through the facility. That's it.
No, but so that's the same prop. So DOT says crossing guards are nothing, you can't enforce, you can't make a school hire crossing guards. You can't make them keep, because these, or anything, you can't make the manager of this property hire guards that say, get off my property, only come this way. You can't enforce that in any way.
Sorry, let me finish my thought. This being a private lot, every lot can have a private guard, a guard booth or a post where they can say, where they're monitoring vehicles coming in or coming out, who is going in and going out. And at that point, they can say pedestrians are not allowed. This is only for cars. And so it's like, it's not a public street, it's a private property. So it is more possible here for a guard to stand right there at the curb cut and prevents people from walking. I do not think it to be a very difficult solution, and it's a very doable solution, and it's not similar to a crossing guard, where a crossing guard is standing in the middle of the road. And this is a private property where, they're monitoring the safety of their own facility, and if they are so keen on wanting a safety of this thing, maybe that's a solution that they can look at. I personally, I don't have an issue, but if that can solve that concern.
For me, the owner's reluctance to do this thing, because it would be unsafe, makes me even more concerned. Like, the owner is concerned about people walking through the parking lot. People are going to walk through the parking lot. That's what parking lots do. You walk through parking lots. And the idea that you don't have a way to go safely through the parking lot to your car. Let's say you're parked on the upper left-hand corner of the lot and it's not safe to walk there. That's significant. And you're never going to be able to stop people from doing what they do. I mean, if you think about what a parent, what it's going to have to go through is dropping their kid off by car, where there's all of these people arriving to go to the office that morning. And they're all driving down South Avenue, and they're all making a left into the parking lot or into that other roadway, whatever it's called. Maybe it's Teleport Drive. And there you are, and now you're going to have to turn around and leave. And you're adding 20 minutes to your morning commute, and no way, right? And so everyone is going to want to do exactly what DOT anticipated, it seems to me. I mean, I don't know how crowded it already is with the 2 buildings that are already built.
Well, I think one of the things I said with regards to the peak travel to work, it is different from the school hours.
Mm-hmm.
The school hours is 7 to 8, like big drop off, whereas the office work starts later, so there isn't an overlap at that
Well,
time.
there is. How many people here come to work at 8 o'clock? A lot.
I'm not saying
Yeah.
it's zero, it's the
Yeah.
factor is much less.
It's only so many days that, not that of course, I wonder if there's a way that we can, that Department of Child Safety could feel comfortable in it. But how many months of the year are children going to be walking 100 and all those feet to school? Generally, from because when I drop off my children,
Really
it's
little kids. You're not going to have them walking thousands of feet. These are high school kids.
I just think that, this is problematic because I think that DOT is making a statement about a condition that they want to see that probably can't be accommodated, which is zero risk to students coming to this school.
I don't
And
think that's it.
I think that the property owner can suggest all these things, and it would be very easy for DOT to poke holes in them. And the result is like, just don't develop the site. Just come out and tell them, don't develop the site, rather than have them jump through all of these hoops to try and make this site 100% safe, which it can't be. You've got cars and you've got pedestrians. And there's always going to be opportunities for them to come into conflict. At some point, you have to say, I think I put in enough safety items here, and you just got to let it go and let it run. Because the bottom line is, students, if you put an arm down to prevent walkers, it's not going to stop some students from darting under there.
No.
If you put a guard there, he's going to catch some of them, he's not going to catch the other ones. If you seal it up and make everybody make a U-turn to go back out the way they came in the northernmost teleport drive entrance that could be used, you run the risk of unsafe driving practices, because people don't want the issue of having to then, if they're waiting on a line to get in, to then wait on a line to get out. So any of these options actually, bring about additional possibilities for risk. I think that at some point you've got to understand that this developer is committed to having as safe a site for young people as possible, and understand that young people are going to do their best to avoid the safest way in if it means it's going to take them more time. And those people who have young children are going to wait in line. They're not going to let their 6-year-old off and go across that parking lot and see if you can make it. They're going to be the ones who take the drive in and wait. Those who have 14-year-olds are going to drop their 14-year-old either here or at Teleport,
Teleport, I don't know if they
or
can-
anywhere they can stop and say, hey, I'm late
out.
for work, just
Yeah.
make it work one way or another. You get hit, oh well, I'll see you at the hospital, so you better watch which way you're going.
Right.
That's basically what's going to happen. I don't see how you can make a site like this with these issues, like a parking lot that large, safe, to be safely traversed, so there's zero risk to
No,
pedestrians.
I don't think the pursuit is zero risk. I don't get why this idea of some kind of walkway is such a big deal. People need to walk in a parking lot. What's the big deal with creating
Well, for the most part, you
let me
do.
just finish my sentence. What's the big deal with creating one north-south route where you don't even build the sidewalk? I mean, I just don't understand the reluctance to that, and I don't think it encourages more people to walk. It's simply giving them a zone where you're not going to get hit by a car if you walk over there.
I think.
It's far, it's a long walk.
Regardless of whether the school is on this site or not, if we were to talk about just pedestrian safety, this has been designed for all the regulations that is there in the zoning. So it has been designed, it's typical parking lot design in a corporate parking. You have aisles, you have walkways, people are going to walk whatever way they want to get to their parking lot, if that means cutting through all the parking aisles to get to the corner lot. So we could design it with the best possible ways of letting people walk through this beautiful pristine sidewalk to get to the thing. They will find the shortest route to get to their parking lot if it's located at the corner of South Avenue and Teleport. So I think this has been designed per the regulation, regardless of whether there's a school or there or not. I'm thinking more of if the issue is pedestrian safety and we want to provide it, it has been designed for all the regulations in place.
No, but this is a school safety, this is DOT, it's not zoning,
But
right?
I go back to what Commissioner Otley Brown has said. This is really, we're not talking about infants running around here. These are people who walk daily on the streets to pick up milk and grocery for their parents, and they're crossing city streets. This is a private driveway, and I've said this at the last hearing. This is a private driveway. There are office people coming and going. Vehicles are not darting through and out at a 20, 30, 40 miles per hour. They are literally walking in a very slow fashion way, and with all the school signs and the stop signs and all the bumpers and speed bumps in place, it will be impossible for vehicles to speed through these things. So there are enough checks and balance in place in this private lot, much more than that we will see on a city street. So I really don't have an issue with this, and
Okay.
DOT needs to look at it in a
Well,
different way, I
DOT's,
think.
for me, I defer to DOT, they're the experts on school safety, that's where we were, that's where the applicant was supposed to have gone in the first place and didn't, and this is the results of them not dealing with them initially way back months and months and months ago.
So are we calling are we calling the school case back in?
No, I'm trying to deal with it under this case so as not to have to call the school case back in, because they misrepresented that DOT was not going to review this, and DOT absolutely was reviewing this, and so this is the consequence. So, anyway, okay, let's move on.
New cases, item number 1.
Oh, you
I'm
need a
sorry.
2-minute break? Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we got to get out of here at 12. Oh, we're already past our time.
We have to get out of here by when?
We're supposed to be out of here by 12:30.
Is someone coming in?
I don't think so, but.
Okay, so we just have to stay.
Keep-
Go ahead.
keep going.
2-minute break, or as fast as possible.
2 minute,
Just pause the,
taking a break, taking a 2-minute break.
Okay, we're back on the record. New cases for the July 15th review session. Item number 1, 2018-67 BZ, 7406 Fifth Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay, this is a legalization. We have proof of service of initial application to officials, but I actually did not find notice of hearing anywhere, and I looked and I looked and I looked.
No, I did get it. I'll double check it, but I did get it.
I looked on SharePoint, on active SharePoint, I looked in emails, I found none. It may be hiding under a folder, but I don't know. There are, however, photos showing that notice of hearing was posted on the outside of the PCE to alert building tenants, which is arguably.
This
this
is not a
is-
PCE.
Wait, what is-
This is the first floor extension in the
Oh.
rear, commercial.
7406 Fifth Avenue.
Oh, wait a minute, new cases,
Sequences.
it was changed. Oh, I didn't know
Yes.
that.
Oh, yeah, the
new
whole
cases-
lineup of new
It's like looking
cases
at
was
them like, what
changed
is he talking
completely.
about?
Okay, start over, what is this?
This is 2018-67 BZ, 7406 Fifth Avenue. It's a legalization of
That was the-
one-story horizontal enlargement.
That was marked number 3, actually, in the latest
Right, it was
lineup, that was marked number 3.
Really? The
Look
lineup
up
I looked at last week
7406.
made it 1.
Yeah.
Made it number
last week's-
1.
Yeah, last week was
week's
one.
7406.
And then
Let's figure this
2018-149
out.
BZ is
There it
2,
is.
then
Okay. How did,
2018-167
why?
is 3.
All right, never mind. Okay, never mind,
Stay on
okay,
track.
sorry, starting again.
When did you get that?
So, never mind what I said about service, okay? We have proof of service of initial application to officials and of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. Community board recommends approval with 1 recusal. There is 1 letter of objection referring to loss of light and air for adjoining tenants by allowing the enlargement, but the writer may not have understood this is a legalization of an existing long-standing condition. So whatever light and air was lost. The Sanborn map dating from prior to 1961 isn't legible, and it's important because we need that to establish that the building existed in 1961 in order to be eligible for this special permit. The requested floor area increase is less than the allowable under the special permit, and the extension is only at the first floor of a commercial overlay district where commercial uses typically extend into the rear yard, and no rear yard is required within 100 feet of a corner in this zoning district. And the yard area is actually, in this case, surrounded mostly by taller buildings, really hemmed in. I note there are some large HVAC units sitting on dunnage beams on the roof, which I hope meet noise code, and otherwise will be properly sound attenuated. It's a lot of air conditioning outside a resident's window, so they really need to attend to that. I understood that the building next door also has such units and maybe a worse offender. Fire department, however, objects to this application, stating, a site inspection was performed on July 12th by members of the fire department, and the following is our objection. egress at the rear of the second and third floor of the residential building of the residential use has been compromised in that tenants of these two floors would not be able to evacuate the building from the rear in the event of any emergencies because it's really landlocked. The use of the first floor is being used as a massage parlor, and there were no licensed massage therapists on duty at the time of inspection, so that should be DOB alerted to that. The fire department recommends that a residential sprinkler system be installed in the stairwell from the first to the third floors. Plans should be revised to allow the massage rooms constructed at the first floor and an application filed with the BSA for a special permit for a PCE. That's fire department really doing zoning work, thank you, okay. Once an application for a residential sprinkler system, revised plans of the first floor, and an application for a special permit have been filed, the department will review and determine compliance with our objection. So extremely helpful that they did that site inspection.
Just want to add that there are actually several Sanborn maps that are not legible.
Yes.
So they need to go back and make sure all those maps, because they do talk to the legality and the historic use. And it's definitely not clear from the map about the extension, when that extension came out. That's really what we are looking for.
No, actually.
The 266 square foot extension, it's not clear from the maps, the Sanborn maps.
Right, but the extension, that's a legalization, that's what they're here applying for. So
Right.
it doesn't matter if it was installed illegally without permits 5 years
I
ago
see.
or 20 years ago. The issue is that the 73...
Could you speak up a little? I'm sorry to interrupt
Oh.
the commissioners. No,
Really? You can't?
He said he couldn't hear you as well.
Oh, wow.
Because of the noise.
Yeah.
That's so, wow. And we're mic'd, so, okay, so what I wanted to say is that the depth of the extension doesn't matter about when it was installed. Could have been last year, 5 years ago, because it's here to be legalized, right? What does matter is that a 73-621 is not available to a building that wasn't existing prior to 1961, so we need that. Even though when you look at the facade of the building, it had to have been built prior to 61 typologically, but we can't prove it because we can't read the maps.
Right.
Okay, and then a reminder that the maps are not legible, many of them. It's corrupted data is really what the issue is. Okay, anybody else?
I had a similar question to you about the air conditioner, but I also had a question as to how far from the windows of the adjacent apartment building is it? And then it would have led to, it needs sound attenuation covering.
I have a minor comment about the drawing number 201.00. It shows that the foundation are all the way down, the foundation of the proposed extension and the existing extension as well. Shows them as all the way down about 10 feet below grade. This is just a liability issue because there is no cellar in this portion. If the architect is sure about this condition, please put as-built conditions. If you're not sure, please write some disclaimer language on the drawing, like verify in field or something like that. We don't want somebody take this drawing in 10 years from now and start digging and cause something, and then, hey, it's a PSA approved drawing. So
Right.
just clarify about that and put the appropriate language on the drawing to make sure that people understand the conditions.
If they're not sure, what should you say?
If they are not
Verify.
sure, he should say like verify in field, to be verified in field. Some sort of language to alert anybody thinking about digging or exposing the foundations.
Good point. Okay. That's interesting. Okay, thank you.
Next one?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Item number 2, 2018-149BZ, 230 4800 46th Avenue, Queens.
Okay, now where am I? 46th Ave, is that number 2?
146.
That's number 2.
Yeah, that's a-
This is Alphonse
okay.
Duarte.
Okay.
It's a special
yeah.
permit.
Under 621.
Okay, we have proof of service of initial application to officials and of notice of hearing to neighbors and officials. Community Board recommends approval. We have 1 letter in support and 3 in opposition. citing concerns about how the residence is being used. And then I say, are they saying this is a community facility, which it apparently kind of is. Our project manager posed the same question during her review many months ago. In response, the applicant obtained a DOB interpretation stating that they have no objection to characterizing the occupancy as a one-family J3 R3 dwelling. However, DOB made no representation about the zoning use designation, that's building code occupancy designation. The special permit is available to buildings containing defined term residential uses, which are defined as uses within use group 1 and use group 2, 1 to 3 family homes. The 1978 state law that was provided by the applicant defines community residence and family care homes with fewer than 14 persons as a, quote, family unit. Hence, in my view, would satisfy the definition of a residential unit under the zoning resolution. Our council should be considering that, though, okay? And to quote from the, I'm just quoting from the 1978 state law, which says in paragraph E, and I don't have the citation in front of me, a community residence established pursuant to this section and family care homes shall be deemed a family unit for all purposes of local laws and ordinances, and that's a state law, so that's a direction. As another threshold matter, we need a Sanborn map to establish that the house existed prior to 1989, which is one of the options. This little house is already slightly overbuilt at 2158 square feet, including the proposed, including the enclosed porch, which may or may not have been built pursuant to permits as of right. The proposal would cure this possible defect, replace and make permanent in a slightly different location the area occupied by the enclosed porch, to turn it into a bedroom and allow for a slight enlargement to 2181.4 square feet, where 2,200 square feet is the maximum allowable under the special permit. And this is a kind of a design observation. It seems as if the person living in that new bedroom would be less disturbed by users of the dining room. If there were a little corridor provided that leads directly to the bedroom, or extend the new side entry to provide direct access from the outside. I just kind of feel sorry for the person where everyone's in the dining room and their door is right outside, is right there. So maybe, I don't know if that would work to have a little separate entrance, but that's a suggestion. They did not provide us with a second floor plan of the building, and should.
Second floor plan?
Yeah, and they need to properly designate the area labeled rear yard. It's not a rear yard, it should be designated as a side yard, and show R31 requirements for that, which is a minimum of 5 feet and 20 feet on the corner lot. So 5 feet on the long end and 20 feet on the short end. And those were my comments.
I had additional comments with regards to the site plans.
So you need to really
Oh.
speak up into the...
I had additional comments with regards to the existing site plan. They need to provide, with the existing plan, they need to show the existing site plan. We only see the ground floor and the second floor. It needs to come with a site plan indicating the yards and the widths. And the statement of fact refers to a 1970 CO. We do not have a copy of it, so if the applicant provide that.
Okay.
I had a question. Did you suggest a door to the outside
Can you turn the mic?
on the new bedroom?
Yeah, that was one idea, because I was looking at where a corridor would go, and the corridor would either cut through some closets or be too narrow to meet handicap requirements. I'm just not sure without looking. I didn't sit there with, yellow trace and try to go over it. So what I was thinking is either you do that, an interior corridor, or there's a little side entrance that's new that they're providing, that if you extend that to create a little bit more of a terrace and then that person can go through a little door from that kind of terrace. That would be more private, and then not having to exit through the dining room all the time, which I
And then you would seal that exit.
Or, you know, that's up to the group. You know, I don't know enough about what kind of access they need, what kind of interaction they need, all that sort of stuff. Does it make it too isolated if the door's on the outside? That's really their call. This is really just a suggestion. Yeah, just because I observed that it would be a little bit of a drag to be right off the dining room.
Anybody else?
Anything else? No? Okay.
Yes, okay. Item number 3, 2018-167BZ, 1133 East 22nd Street, Brooklyn.
That's the first one. No?
East 22nd.
Ugh. Everything's out of order. When does 21st Street come back? East 22nd.
This single-family home enlargement.
There we go, okay. Okay, we have proof of service of initial application to officials and of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. Community Board recommends approval. What's called new, the quote new and quote existing labeling on the proposed drawings doesn't match the existing and the demolition drawings. They need to show on the proposed plans the dimensions of the existing walls to remain. The amount of walls to remain on the second floor shown on the proposed doesn't make sense compared to the existing. It's almost like two different sets of drawings, which is amazing. They need to show on the existing drawings the height above grade of the first floor and show elevations on all drawings in NAVD 88, which is the standard in America. The proposal to reduce the total side yard width to 12 feet, where 13 foot is required, is not permitted. The resulting change to the project, however, I think is minimal, but anyway, it's not permitted. They need to provide an axonometric of the building that describes the roof line, because it's a very wacky roof line. And in elevation looks terrible, but maybe in axonometric it's more acceptable. They need to place the FAR and open space ratio studies on an area map instead of just a list. They need to justify the requested 1 FAR increase with respect to neighborhood character, because based on the list, it doesn't look like there's many, if any, with 1 FAR. And in no event can the increase exceed 1 FAR, which equals, to be clear, 4,000.00000 square feet, when it's 1 times 4,000 square foot zoning lot. And they need to justify the 25-foot rear yard at the second and third floor by providing information about the heights in feet of adjacent properties on either side and those to the rear. From what I could tell of the photographs, none of the adjacent properties have high second floors. They all have low extensions, 1-story extensions, but no high extension. Anybody else?
What was I going to say? Speak loud. No, as you were saying, I had a question. With regards to the findings, is the analysis within 400-foot radius or 200-foot radius?
Oh, it's always either minimum 400 or 1,000.
So this one has been done based on 200-foot.
It's a special permit.
So that has to increase.
Yeah, yeah, okay. But just to clarify on that, on these special permits, what I'm usually looking at is the 2 tax blocks on either side of the house, because that's where you're looking at immediate neighborhood character, but 400 is usually what we look at on these. Right, okay.
Okay. I think that was only my question.
Regarding the objections, I see in the statement of facts, so page 4, one of the objections says proposed height and setback are contrary to ZR 23-631. In the statement of facts, they didn't ask for any height waivers.
They can't get one. This is not available for height
Special
waivers, right?
They can only get perimeter wall height if if the adjacent building has excessive perimeter
Right.
wall height, but I think that's the only.
But actually, I didn't see, it's a 32-foot,
Yeah.
2-inch high building, and they're maintaining they're going to 32-foot 6, and I
Yeah.
believe 35 is the maximum height.
Right.
So, and their
The perimeter
perimeter,
wall height is 21 feet, which is less than the permitted 25 feet.
right, and their existing perimeter wall is 22.6 and 19.6, depending on how you measure it. So I think that's a mistake in the statement of facts, maybe left over from something, but you can never ask for a height increase on these 622s.
Also, also note that a lot of citations to different open space ratios and a lot of inconsistent calculations. So I would just encourage the applicant to look at their plans and confirm what their proposed open space ratio is, and what it is. Yeah, all over the place.
Okay. All right.
Oh, sorry. Item number 4, 2019-36BZ 12 West 21st Street, Manhattan.
I hope that's the first one. Yeah, I'll just go to the back. Okay. This is the one that's a legalization, and we don't have proof of notice of hearing. I looked everywhere and couldn't find, but we do have proof of service of initial application to officials, and happily, photos show that notice of hearing was posted on the outside of the PCE to alert building tenants. It's a retail building, so there was no general lobby to put this in. Community Board waives its recommendation. We have one letter in support. We have DOI, and we have Fire Department letter of no objection, but I just want to make sure Fire Department was aware this was a legalization. And we have LPC sign off. Anybody else on this?
We have proof of notification.
Notice of hearing?
Notice of
I'm
hearing?
sorry, notice of hearing, yes.
Okay.
We do?
And I have a note there, on this one again, there are inconsistent numbers as to the square footage on the first floor and the cellar. So if they could just confirm that, the square footage on either of those floors, that'd be
Right, and so they also need, this is the Ladies Mile Historic District, so they got LBC.
Yeah, I said,
Yeah.
yeah. Inconsistent numbers on this. Okay. Okay, so we just need, so where did you find the proof of notice of hearing?
Well, I had actually, Rory and I both had actually asked Todd about it, and so on June 25th it was submitted, so he resubmitted it recently, and it should have been uploaded. It was Wednesday, he resubmitted it.
It didn't get
I
uploaded
know, but
or?
I do have it in front of
Okay,
me.
if you could forward it to me and then upload it?
Yeah, I'll just do it.
Okay.
great.
If for some reason it just didn't show up. Let me just forward it to you.
Thanks. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Item number 5, can we go on? I'm sorry.
Yes, yes.
Yes, 5.
Oh.
2018-150BZ 2215 Homecrest Avenue, Brooklyn. This is a variance,
Okay.
enlargement of a single-family home.
Yeah. Okay, it's not in a flood zone, just because this looks like it should be. I think it's a minute outside of the flood zone. So careful when you design a house a minute outside of the flood zone and ignore that tomorrow could be your day. But we have notice of proof of service of initial application to officials and of notice of hearing to neighbors and officials. Community Board recommends approval with 4 opposed, and described 2 letters in objecting to the hearing, to the proposal, and 1 supporting. The Community Board described the application as a special permit. This is a variance application under 7221. I'd like to verify with the district manager that the Community Board understood at the time of their review that that this was a variance application, since the findings are not the same as the 73-622 special permit. Applicant is required, by the way, under legislation that was passed, I think, in 2017, to submit the materials presented to the Community Board, so that way we can see whether they were misled, frankly, about a 73-622, not a 72-21. We received one letter of conditional approval asking for the project from the community board, asking for the project to, oh, I'm sorry, one letter of conditional, let's say. Support, asking for the project to be legal, quote, from my side, but I don't understand what that means. So, I'm not sure what that means. The 73-622 special permit is available in Community Board 15, which this is, but only to 1- and 2-family detached and semi-detached residences. I'd like a survey to establish what this building is exactly. The architect's existing drawing shows it built close to one of the lot lines, but it isn't clear by how much. It seems to be on the drawings a party wall, but there's no survey. A building is attached if it is within 6 inches of the lot line. So it looks like it is at least attached on one side, but it's certainly not attached on the other side where there's like almost 2 feet, 1 foot 9 inches, I think, to the lot line. The statement of facts described the building as, quote, row and semi-detached, unquote. I don't know what that is, not a defined term. It's not a defined term in the zoning resolution. The house is either, it's kind of one of those things, it's either detached, semi-detached, or attached. And I appreciate that the language in the zoning resolution definition of semi-detached is very unclear, due to poor use of commas, the famous comma. And the jump to the definition of building, which is also confusing. I think actually for the benefit of this applicant, a DOB interpretation should be sought to find out what this thing is. If this must be a 7221 application, then the findings are very different from a 73-622, and you need a unique physical condition that leads to a hardship and the requirement that the minimum variance necessary be all that the board grants. So I don't know whether we actually should proceed with this analysis as a 7221, but the claimed hardship in the statement of facts is that the building isn't eligible for a 73-622 special permit, so that must not be fair, and that's certainly not a unique physical condition. Many buildings in many community boards and zoning districts can't apply for the 73-622 special permit, particularly where there are attached buildings. The zoning resolution specifically states that it can't be the zoning resolution that drives the hardship complained of. And given the difficulties we often encounter with semi-attached buildings that are in an identical row, with only one house in the row applying for the special permit, I see the point that city planning was making by excluding fully attached buildings from eligibility. The uniqueness study happily digs a bit deeper and brings up an interesting history of development on this site with the bizarre configuration of attached row houses with not quite alternating one-story and two-story buildings to, according to the analyst, allegedly providing for light and air of the taller building over the shorter. But that theory only makes sense if there were an easement over the shorter, as otherwise there's nothing to prevent the view and light from being rightfully taken by the shorter neighbor. And of course, we don't have information on whether that condition merely resulted from the neighbor's later enlargements of one-story and cellar row houses, since that one-story typology is fairly typical around the corner. There's a lot of one-story houses around the corner. And there is an identical development to the rear of this site with two-story houses abutting a one-story and no windows on the sidewalls at the second story overlooking the one story. So clearly that is a front to back layout of sleeping rooms, as is typical of most row houses. The 1950 Sanborn shows that this was the developer's preference for the entire Avenue V block frontage around the corner, and those houses continue today, although many have added a story since. I also don't see that you can use buildings eligible for a discretionary permit as a way of reducing the scope of the uniqueness sites. If that is something the board has permitted as a uniqueness finding in the past, I'd like to see examples of it, but not convinced that that should be something that counts as reducing the scope of your buildings that would sort of make this, would then reduce the number of buildings that are unique. And whether a house has a complying side yard or not may not mean it can be vertically enlarged. Did the uniqueness study look at whether all of those one-story houses around the corner on 13th and 14th Street can be enlarged? I don't think any of them can. So that's a lot of houses that can't be enlarged vertically by just running up the side wall line, right? So the issue is probably that this is a tiny house with only 935 square feet of really habitable space, the balance being in the basement, which typologically is used as the garage, and that side yard requirements prevent a practical vertical and as-of-right horizontal enlargement. However, the conforming building, like the proposed, eliminates the cellar, so that, and therefore that difficulty of not occupying, not having a good occupancy of that lower level. And though the upper floor, the addition on the second and third floors in the conforming building is rather unattractive, there's a 15-foot, 6-foot wide addition with 4 very ample bedrooms in it and 4 full baths, so which yields over 3,100 square feet of above-grade floor area. So I'm not sure a hardship really results from this situation. It's just what results from the situation is an ugly house, which I don't think is a hardship. Unfortunately, that's not a hardship. If there were an A finding, then I would not want to put this building in a better position than its immediate, similarly situated neighbors. So therefore, I think the waivers that would be allowed, that might be allowed, shouldn't provide for more than those immediate neighbors have. The study should provide us with what those neighbors have, which is, basically it's a 2-story house with a complying rear yard, and that's it. And they're built lot line to lot line, and this one's just a little bit short of lot line to lot line. The proposal, for example, is 1 story taller than the neighbors in the row, and taller than all of the other houses in that identical development group. So it is proposed to be much better situated than those guys are, not to mention the shallow rear yard, which none of them have. The existing building is described on the floor plans as having a cellar with bedrooms and no windows, which is so confusing. Totally illegal, by the way. But the section shows the cellar floor not more than 50% below grade, so it's actually a basement. The drawings need to be revised to reflect that, and dimensions need to be provided. And in the event that we didn't grant this waiver, those bedrooms are illegal. They can't be bedrooms. Also for neighborhood character finding, and because this is a house in an attached row, elevations of the adjoining houses have to be shown. Other comments?
Okay, so with regards to the existing building, I also had a question whether it is a cellar or a basement, because different documents stated differently. What I did notice, the certificate of occupancy refers it as a basement, and the existing plan, while it refers it as a cellar, it is included in the floor area calculation. So I would like the clarity on that one. With regards to the as-of-right development that they have shown, the review of the as-of-right floor area analysis on the plan, especially the second floor area, would be less than 1,000 square feet, whereas in their drawings they're showing it's 1,230 square feet. So they need to correct it. I think it's not dimension, so I'm just kind of going by different sets of elimination process, so it would be less.
So it needs to be dimensioned
Correct,
also.
dimension. With regards to the hardship, the site is 23 feet wide, and the abutting attached homes are on an 18-foot wide lot. However, most of the lots are 20-foot wide and are built to the lot line. So if I were to look at the neighborhood character, and if there is a hardship to be made, or if we were to grant a waiver through a special permit, I think the only extent it would make sense is to give a side yard waiver, but not a rear yard waiver. And in terms of the neighborhood character, there are 3 similar attached row houses that are built in the rear, as you had mentioned, and there is no continuity of the facade and the breaks. So in terms of what they're proposing, we're expanding in the front. I do not have an issue with it. However, I do have concerns with the rear. Those are really my, and I agree with you with regards to the zoning and how it's being used as a hardship. And I would like a clarification on it being, whether it's a semi-detached or an attached. I know there's been confusion in the way the zoning interpreted it as part of the 2011 text change, so a clarity would be helpful.
From DOB.
From DOB,
Yeah.
exactly.
Anybody
No
else?
additional questions for me.
Okay.
Yeah, I have 3 issues. The first issue is they are claiming the provisions or the requirements of the zoning resolution as hardship, because they are saying since the special permit is not available, we're asking for variance. I believe if they want this to fly, they should change the argument a little bit to present like a real hardship, in addition to a uniqueness, of course. The second thing, I'm looking at the proposed, the as-of-right building. The as-of-right building, for me, it seems like a very decent house. And the third thing is for the as-of-right plans, the titles for the plan says proposed, first floor proposed, second floor, so if we can just have them change that from proposed to as-of-right, yes. To avoid confusion with the proposed set.
Anybody else? No? Okay, great.
Okay, this concludes the public review session for July 15, 2019.
Bring all your meals.
Yeah.
Tomorrow.